Welcome, dear friends, to a peaceful journey through the rich, winding tale of the shinobi world, a world where bravery, sacrifice, and destiny intertwine beneath the ever watchful eyes of the moon. Tonight, we will drift through the timeless lore of Naruto, the beloved story of a young boy with dreams larger than the skies themselves. We'll wander through the hidden villages where ancient histories of peace and conflict have shaped the very lives of those who walk its paths. We'll meet the heroes and legends who have given everything to protect their world, and the friends who have walked beside them in both joy and sorrow. We'll pause to listen to the whispers of the past, of Hashirama's vision, of the Uchiha's secrets, and of the bonds forged in the heat of battle. With every story, every lesson, every twist in the journey, we'll find ourselves a little closer to the heart of the hidden leaf. So take a moment to settle in, close your eyes, let the gentle rhythm of your breath guide you, and allow the weight of the day to slip away. Breathe deeply, and with each exhale, feel the quiet embrace of rest drawing near. In this peaceful space, we'll unravel the lore of Naruto, and together we'll let the story gently carry us into a world where all is calm, all is still, and all is well. And if you enjoy drifting through stories like this, you're welcome to subscribe and softly tell me where you're listening from tonight. Now let us begin with the quiet beginnings of the Hidden Leaf Village and the stories that shaped its path. In the beginning, when the world was still young, the land was full of constant conflict, where villages and clans fought to survive, to thrive. It was a world of shadows and hidden secrets, where power was the greatest currency and peace felt like a distant dream. And yet, amidst this chaos, a vision was born. A vision of a place where peace could flourish, where people of all walks of life could stand together, not as enemies, but as allies, working in harmony for a common goal. It was here, in the heart of the Land of Fire, that the Hidden Leaf Village, or Konohagakure, came into existence. The founding of Konoha is a story steeped in the spirit of the first Hokage, Hashirama Senju, and his dream of uniting the world under a banner of peace. A dream that would eventually inspire generations of shinobi to follow in his footsteps and whose sacrifices would echo through time. In those early days, before the walls of the village were built, and the Hokage mountain had taken shape, there was only a land marked by struggle. The Senju clan, known for their strength and resilience, clashed with the Uchiha clan, whose mastery of the Sharingan made them fierce adversaries. The war between these two clans raged on, each battle leaving scars on the land and on the hearts of those who fought. Yet Hashirama Senju and Madara Uchiha, two childhood friends turned rivals, shared a bond stronger than their differences. Together, they dreamed of a place where their clans could set aside their animosity and work for the greater good. It was in the midst of this bitter feud that Hashirama's dream took root. He envisioned a village that would stand as a beacon of hope, where the might of shinobi could be used not for destruction, but for protection. This village would be a home for all who sought peace, a sanctuary from the endless war that had plagued their world for generations. Hashirama's resolve was unwavering, despite the forces that tried to tear him down. Through trials and tribulations, he pressed on, gathering allies, forging alliances with other clans, and working tirelessly to create the foundations of Konoha. In time, his dream began to take shape, and the Hidden Leaf Village was born. But as with all things of great importance, this dream came at a great cost. The formation of the hidden leaf was not without bloodshed. The violence of the world did not simply vanish because of a dream. Hashirama's leadership was tested the time and time again, but he remained steadfast in his belief that peace was worth the sacrifice. The village was built on the hard work and dedication of those who shared his vision, but it was also built on the pain of countless battles fought and lives lost. Konoha's first steps were marked by the strength of the shinobi, warriors whose duty was to protect, to defend, and to uphold the values that Hashirama had instilled in them. But the village, though strong, was fragile. The forces of war and the tension between the clans still lingered, threatening to undo all that had been achieved. As the first Hokage, Hashirama sought to maintain the delicate balance between peace and war. He was not just a leader, but a symbol of hope, a beacon of what could be achieved when people worked together for the greater good. Yet even with his powerful resolve, not everyone shared his vision. Madara Uchiha, his once closest friend, saw the world differently. Madara's vision of the future was shaped by fear, anger, and a desire for control, a desire to rule, to bend the world to his will. The rivalry between Hashirama and Madara became the defining conflict of Konoha's early years. Despite their shared history and dreams, their paths diverged. Madara could not see beyond his own bitterness, and the growing divide between him and Hashirama became irreparable. Their final confrontation, one of the most pivotal moments in Konoha's history, set the stage for a future where the legacy of their conflict would reverberate throughout generations. And so, the Hidden Leaf Village stood at the crossroads of hope and despair. Hashirama's dream of peace clashed with Madara's vision of domination, and the future of the village hung in the balance. Yet despite the weight of their rivalry, Hashirama's legacy endured. His dream of a peaceful world would inspire those who came after him, and the village he founded would become the heart of a shinobi world that would forever be shaped by the echoes of his ideals. In the quiet moments that followed the storm of battle, the village began to grow. It began to bloom as the first Hokage's dream took root in the hearts of the villagers. The foundations of Konoha were strong, built not just on the ideals of a single man, but on the hope that peace could one day be more than just a dream. The Hidden Leaf Village, nestled within the land of fire, became a place where the impossible felt within reach, where the spirit of unity and perseverance could guide even the most troubled souls toward the light. And so, with each passing day, Konoha flourished. It became a village like no other, a symbol of what could be achieved when people, no matter their past, no matter their differences, came together with the hope of a brighter future. The tale of the Hidden Leaf Village had only just begun, and the legacy of Hashirama Senju, the first Hokage, would forever be a part of it. In the shadow of the Hidden Leaf's birth, other villages began to take shape. Konoha, though a beacon of hope, was not the only place to rise from the rubble of war. The creation of the hidden villages was not merely an act of necessity, but a response to the deeply rooted desire for survival, for peace, even if that peace came at the cost of isolation and guarded secrets. To the north, within the land of water, the Hidden Mist Village, or Kirigakure, rose from the waves. The land itself was as wild and unforgiving as the people who lived there, their hearts hardened by countless storms and endless conflict. The founding of Kirigakuri was a reflection of the struggle for control over both the land and its future. It was a place born of blood and mist, where strength was revered above all else, and the will to protect one's people was forged in the crucible of battle. In contrast to the gentle ideals of Hashirama Senju, the hidden mist was a place where harsh decisions were often made. Its first leader, the Blood Mist era's bloody Mizukaji, would guide the village with an iron fist, a reminder that not all paths to peace were lined with gentle steps. The mist was a village of contrasts, hidden beneath a perpetual fog. It stood as a fortress of both beauty and brutality. Yet it too sought peace, though it often seemed out of reach. To the west, in the land of wind, the hidden sand village, Sunagakure, came into being. Its origins were shaped by the harsh, unforgiving desert winds, where survival meant mastering the elements, and control of the sand itself became the symbol of power. Sunagakure's founding was closely tied to the battle for control over scarce resources, and its people, like the land they called home, were resilient, enduring in the face of hardship. The sand was not a place of tranquility, but one of survival, a village where the wind whispered of forgotten wars and endless struggles for dominance. Yet for all its battles, Sunagakure shared with the other villages a deep-rooted desire to live in peace, a desire to grow beyond the struggles of their past and build something stronger, something lasting. But peace would always be elusive for the hidden sand. Their Mizukage, though strong and wise, carried the weight of many failed attempts at forging true alliances. The sandstorms, much like their internal struggles, never truly allowed the village to settle, to rest. As these villages emerged, so too did the bonds between them begin to form. A world once marked by constant warfare now saw the first whispers of treaties and alliances, though they were fragile at best. In the world of shinobi, where one's life could be taken in the blink of an eye, trust was something that needed to be earned. But slowly, the villages began to understand that their survival was tied not to endless battle, but to cooperation. The hidden cloud village, or Kumogakure, in the land of lightning, followed the same pattern of formation. Born from the need for protection against both the world's dangers and the very land that cracked and thundered with violent storms, Kumogakure stood as a bastion of strength. With its towering mountains and the power of its ninjutsu, the cloud sought to control both the skies and the destiny of its people. Its first Raikage, a figure of immense power and resolve, forged the village's path with the thunderous energy of the land itself. But even Kumogakure, for all its strength, was not immune to the tides of fate. The hidden stone village, Iwagakure, rose in the land of earth, where solid rock and unyielding mountains bore witness to generations of battles for supremacy. The stone village was not one for grace or diplomacy. Instead, it was built on the principles of endurance, of outlasting every trial the world threw at it. The stone walls that protected it were a reflection of the will of its people, a people who sought to hold firm, who would not bend under the weight of the world. Each village had its own story, its own origin, some born of unity, others of bloodshed, but all shared the same goal, survival. They were all striving for the same thing, a lasting peace that could endure beyond the wars that had shaped their past. It was an ideal that seemed distant, like a faint dream on the horizon, but one worth striving toward nonetheless. Despite their differences, the villages were bound together by the same struggles, and over time, the bonds between them grew, first in the form of fragile treaties, then in the establishment of the 5K Summit. The summit was a rare gathering of the leaders of the five great shinobi villages, where peace talks were held, alliances were made, and the future of the shinobi world was discussed. The five Kage, the Hokage of the Hidden Leaf, the Mizukage of the Hidden Mist, the Raikage of the Hidden Cloud, the Tsuchikage of the Hidden Stone, and the Kazakage of the Hidden Sand represented the hopes and dreams of their people. Yet, despite the unity they seemed to project, there were always those who sought to disrupt it, to turn the delicate balance into chaos once more. But for all the conflict that lay ahead, the founding of the hidden villages marked the beginning of a new era. It was an era where the dream of peace, of unity, though frail, had the potential to take root. And it was the role of the shinobi, those who carried the weight of their villages on their shoulders, to carry that dream forward. In time, the people of the villages came to understand the cost of peace, how fragile it was, how easily it could be shattered by those who still clung to the old ways of war and violence. But even as the shadows of conflict loomed large, the idea of a world built on cooperation began to take hold, slowly but surely. And with each new generation of shinobi, the dream of the founders, Hashirama, Madara, and all those who had sacrificed for a better future, was passed down like a lantern that, though flickering, still burned brightly in the hearts of those who believed. The villages may have been born out of bloodshed, but they were not defined by it. Instead, they were defined by the hope that one day they could stand together, not as enemies, but as brothers and sisters in arms, bound by the shared desire for peace. In the quiet, dawn-lit days of the Hidden Leaf Village's early existence, there was a man whose name would become synonymous with the village's spirit and hope. His name was Heishirama Senju, the first Hokage, a man whose dream shaped not only the future of his village, but the very essence of the shinobi world itself. To speak of Hashirama is to speak of the balance between strength and compassion, of leadership born not from power alone, but from a deep and unshakable belief in the possibility of peace. Hashirama's journey was not an easy one. He was born into the Senju clan, a family marked by their resilience and their connection to the powerful and often dangerous world of shinobi. The Senju were known for their strength, but also for their understanding of the fragile nature of life. From an early age, Hashirama was deeply aware of the pain of conflict, of the scars that were left upon the hearts of those who fought. And yet, despite the weight of this knowledge, he chose not to carry hatred in his heart. Instead, he held onto a single, unyielding belief that one day there could be peace. The world in which Hashirama grew up was one of constant turmoil. The land was ravaged by battles, where blood was shed not only in defense, but in the pursuit of power. He was not born into a world of tranquility, but one where every day was a fight for survival. As a young man, Hashirama faced the brutal reality of the shinobi world, a world where power was the key to survival, and where weakness was met with violence. But Hashirama was different. His strength was not born from a desire to dominate, but from a desire to protect. He did not seek to conquer his enemies, but to understand them, to find a way to bring them together, to heal the rifts that divided their world. His dream was not just to create a village, but to create a sanctuary, a place where people could live without the fear of endless war, where children could grow up with the promise of a future not defined by conflict. Hashirama's vision was not shared by all, however. The world around him was full of those who sought power for power's sake, those who believed that strength alone could shape the future. One of these individuals was Madara Uchiha, the leader of the Uchiha clan and once Hashirama's closest friend. Together, they had dreamed of a world where their clans could live side by side, where their differences could be set aside for the greater good. But as time passed, their paths diverged. Madara, whose vision of peace was clouded by a desire for control, grew increasingly distrustful of Hashirama's ideals. He saw the world through a different lens, one shaped by fear and anger. For Madara, peace could only be achieved through domination, through subjugating others and bending them to his will. Where Hashirama saw unity, Madara saw weakness. Their friendship, once a bond of mutual respect and shared purpose, crumbled as their differences became too great to ignore. And so, the first great conflict between the two friends began, a conflict that would define the fate of the Hidden Leaf Village, and ultimately, the future of the shinobi world. Madara's defection from Konoha was a devastating blow to Hashirama's dream of peace. It marked the beginning of a series of battles that would shape the village's early years and force Hashirama to confront the very ideals that had inspired him. Despite the growing tensions with Madara, Hashirama remained resolute in his belief that peace was possible. He sought to build bridges, not walls, and to lead by example. But the weight of leadership was heavy, and the path was often unclear. The challenges he faced were not just external, but internal, the constant struggle to balance the demands of leadership with his own deeply held convictions. He faced the burden of being a symbol of hope, knowing that his actions would set the course for the future of Konoha. In time, Hashirama's vision began to take shape. The Hidden Leaf Village grew, its walls rising as symbols of the peace that Hashirama sought to protect. But the journey was not without its sacrifices. The peace that Hashirama dreamed of was hard-won, and it came at the cost of many battles, many lives. He was forced to confront the harsh realities of leadership, the difficult decisions, the pain of loss, and the weight of responsibility that came with the title of Hokage. Despite the challenges, Hashirama's legacy endured. His unwavering belief in the possibility of peace, even in the face of overwhelming odds, inspired those who followed him. His vision of a world where shinobi could stand together, where villages could coexist in harmony, would live on in the hearts of the people of Konoha. But Hashirama's greatest gift to Konoha was not just the village itself, but the ideals he instilled in its people. He taught them that true strength was not found in the power to destroy, but in the power to protect. He taught them that peace was not a passive state, but an active pursuit, one that required courage, sacrifice, and an unwavering commitment to the greater good. Even in the face of betrayal, war, and loss, Hashirama never lost sight of his dream. His legacy, though shaped by the struggles he faced, was one of hope, a hope that the future could be brighter, that the world could be healed, and that the people of Konoha could carry his vision forward long after he was gone. As the first Hokage, Hashirama's name became synonymous with the very essence of Konoha itself, a village founded on the principles of unity, peace, and the belief that even in the darkest of times, there was always a way forward. His story, like the village he created, was a story of perseverance, of holding on to hope even when the world seemed to fall apart. And though his time as Hokage was marked by conflict, his legacy was one of light. In the years that followed, the people of Konoha would look to Hashirama as a symbol of what could be achieved when a single man's dream became the guiding light for an entire village. In the quiet shadows of the Hidden Leaf Village, long before the village's legacy would be written in the hearts of future generations, there was a conflict that simmered beneath the surface. A conflict that began with two childhood friends, each with a vision for the future, but each seeing that future through very different eyes. One was Hashirama Senju, the first Hokage, whose dreams of peace would shape the course of history. The other was Madara Uchiha, the man who would become Konoha's greatest adversary. Madara Uchiha, born into the powerful Uchiha clan, was a man marked by both brilliance and tragedy. From the very beginning, Madara's path was shaped by the fierce pride of his clan and the weight of their history. The Uchihas were known for their strength, their formidable Sharingan, and their fierce sense of loyalty to their clan. But this strength came at a cost, for the Uchiha were often seen as distant, their power both revered and feared. This fear bred isolation, and over time it became clear that the Uchiha's future would not be one of peace, but of division. Madara's vision for the world was one of control, but not through violence alone. He believed that only by forcing others to submit could true peace be achieved. Unlike Hashirama, who dreamed of a world where different clans could live in harmony, Madara's dream was far darker, a world where the strongest ruled, where peace could only be attained through domination. The friendship between Hashirama and Madara, once rooted in shared ideals and childhood camaraderie, began to crack as their paths diverged. For Madara, peace could only be attained through control, through the strength to dominate not just enemies, but the very structure of society itself. He came to believe that the only way to prevent the world from falling into an endless cycle of violence was to establish a rule where the Uchiha were supreme. As the years passed, the rift between Madara and Hashirama grew, with Madara increasingly seeing his former friend as weak, naive even, for holding on to a dream that seemed so impossible in the face of such overwhelming adversity. Hashirama, for his part, remained steadfast in his belief that peace could be built, that understanding could overcome fear. He dreamed of a world where, despite their differences, clans could work together for a common goal. But this dream seemed further and further out of reach. As tensions mounted between the Senju and the Uchiha, it became clear that the differences between Hashirama and Madara were irreconcilable. The war between their clans raged on, each battle serving only to deepen the divide. In the end, Madara's deep distrust of Hashirama and his belief in the necessity of control led him down a darker path. At the heart of this conflict was the idea of the village itself. While Hashirama saw Konoha as a place of unity, a sanctuary for all shinobi regardless of clan, Madara saw it as a weakening of the Uchiha's power, a threat to the dominance he believed his clan deserved. Madara believed that to bring true peace to the world, he needed to subdue the forces that threatened his vision. In his eyes, Hashirama's idealistic dream of cooperation was doomed to fail, and he was willing to do whatever it took to ensure his own vision for the future came to fruition. And so, Madara betrayed the very village he helped to create, abandoning Konoha in search of a more absolute solution. His belief in the Uchiha clan's supremacy led him to form his own path, one that would ultimately lead to the beginning of a cycle of violence that would haunt Konoha for generations. But even in his defection, Madara did not abandon his belief in peace. It simply became twisted. His desire to protect his people, to ensure that they would never again be the victims of others' power, turned into a desire to control, to force others into submission. The path he chose was one filled with shadow, and the scars it would leave on the world would be deep and long lasting. In his search for power, Madara delved into forbidden techniques, seeking ways to increase his own strength and to turn the tide in his favor. The Uchiha were known for their powerful Sharingan, but Madara sought to evolve beyond that, to gain control over the very forces that shaped the world. This pursuit led him to uncover the secrets of the Rinnegan, an ancient and powerful eye technique that would grant him unimaginable power. But it was not just the power of the Rinnegan that Madara sought. He also sought to control the very fabric of reality itself. His ultimate goal was the creation of a perfect world, one where suffering and conflict no longer existed, where the cycle of death and rebirth was broken. In his mind, the world was flawed, and only through absolute control could true peace be achieved. Hashirama, for all his understanding and compassion, could never truly grasp the depth of Madara's vision. To him, the idea of absolute control was a perversion of the very ideals he had fought for. Hashirama believed that the beauty of life lay in its imperfection, in the struggle for peace, and in the bonds that formed between people despite their differences. As Madara's path grew darker, Hashirama's own resolve grew stronger. He understood that the conflict between them was not just about the future of Konoha, but about the future of the entire shinobi world. The struggle between them would shape the course of history, determining whether the world would be ruled by fear and power or by hope and unity. In the final clash between Madara and Hashirama, the two childhood friends faced each other not just as rivals, but as symbols of opposing worldviews. Hashirama fought not only for the future of Konoha, but for the future of peace itself. Madara, on the other hand, fought for control, for a world that could be molded to his own vision. Their battle was not just one of strength, but one of ideals, a clash of light and shadow that would reverberate through the years, shaping the destiny of the shinobi world for generations to come. Though Madara would eventually be defeated, his legacy did not fade away. His vision, twisted as it was, left its mark on the world. The cycle of conflict, of ambition, and of the search for peace would continue to echo in the hearts of those who came after him. His defection and his pursuit of absolute power became a cautionary tale, a reminder that even the noblest of goals could be corrupted by fear, anger, and a desire for control. In the end, Madara Uchiha's story is one of tragedy, of a man who sought peace, but in his quest for it, lost sight of what peace truly meant. The Uchiha clan was a name that resonated through the halls of history, a name that carried both power and tragedy, strength and sorrow. Known for their unparalleled abilities, particularly their Sharingan, The Uchiha were revered and feared throughout the shinobi world. Yet the Uchiha were not just warriors. They were people whose hearts were bound to the very fabric of the world's conflicts, whose story was marked by both brilliance and despair. At the heart of the Uchiha clan's legacy was the Sharingan, a dojutsu or eye technique so powerful that it could rival the might of even the most seasoned shinobi. It was said that the Sharingan was a gift from the gods themselves, a mark of the Uchiha's divine bloodline. With it, the Uchiha could see the world in ways no one else could, perceiving the flow of chakra and the hidden movements of their enemies. They could predict attacks, or copy techniques, and with the evolution of the Sharingan, even manipulate the very world around them. But the power of the Sharingan came with a price. It was said that the Sharingan could only reach its full potential through the experience of deep emotional trauma, the pain of loss, the agony of heartbreak. This bond between power and pain was something that shaped the Uchiha clan in ways that few truly understood. For each Uchiha, the path to mastering the Sharingan was both a gift and a curse, a journey that took them through the darkness of their own hearts. For many, the journey of the Uchiha clan was marked by their endless pursuit of power, not for the sake of domination, but for survival. Their power was a reflection of their desire to protect, to defend, and to endure. But over time, this desire to protect became twisted. The Uchiha, once a proud and noble clan, became isolated, their power seen as a threat to those who could not understand it. This sense of isolation was something that the Uchiha felt deeply. Their strength, once seen as a source of pride, became a burden. The village, once a place of sanctuary, became a place where they were feared and mistrusted. The Uchiha felt that they were treated as outsiders within their own home, their loyalty to Konoha questioned at every turn. This sense of alienation became the seed from which the tragedy of the Uchiha clan would grow. The first major crack in the Uchiha's unity came with the death of their beloved leader, Fugaku Uchiha, and the subsequent rise of a younger, more radical faction within the clan. As the Hidden Leaf village grew, so did the tension between the Uchiha and the other clans. It was a tension born not from hatred, but from fear, the fear that the Uchiha's power would one day be used against the village, the very people they had sworn to protect. In this environment of suspicion and resentment, the seeds of rebellion were sown. The Uchiha clan's desire for recognition, for a place of equal standing within the village, grew stronger, and with it, the desire to seize control. It was in this climate of fear and mistrust that the infamous Uchiha massacre occurred, an event that would forever change the course of Konoha's history and leave a permanent scar on the Uchiha name. At the center of this tragedy was Itachi Uchiha, a young man whose loyalty to Konoha and his family was torn between his duty as a shinobi and the dark secrets he was forced to carry. Itachi, a prodigy of the Uchiha clan, was a shinobi of extraordinary talent, even by the standards of his own people. But it was this very talent, his ability to wield the Sharingan with unmatched precision, that would lead him down a path that would tear his world apart. Itachi was forced to make a decision that no one should ever have to face, to choose between the love of his family and his loyalty to the village he had sworn to protect. The Uchiha, led by the radical faction, planned a coup against the village, a plan that would have plunged Konoha into war and bloodshed. In the face of this impending conflict, Itachi made the unthinkable choice. He betrayed his clan, killing his family and leaving behind only a broken legacy. The Uchiha massacre was an event that would haunt Itachi for the rest of his life. It was a sacrifice he made, not for the sake of power, but for the survival of the village. In the wake of his actions, Itachi became both a hero and a villain, seen by some as a tragic figure and by others as a ruthless murderer. The truth of his actions was buried, hidden away by those who sought to protect Konoha's fragile peace. Itachi's burden, the weight of his decisions, would be one he would carry alone until the truth was finally revealed. But even in the darkness of Itachi's actions, the legacy of the Uchiha clan lived on. Though the clan itself was all but destroyed, their bloodline, their eyes, and their power remained a force to be reckoned with. Itachi's younger brother, Sasuke Uchiha, was left to carry the weight of the Uchiha name, and his journey would become one of the most tragic and poignant in the history of the shinobi world. Sasuke's path was shaped by the memories of his family, the pain of loss, and the desire for revenge. It was a path that would lead him away from Konoha, away from the bonds he had formed with his friends, and into the heart of darkness. Sasuke's quest for vengeance would become a symbol of the Uchiha's tragic legacy, a legacy of power, pain, and betrayal. But it was also a journey of redemption, of finding the strength to move beyond the hatred that had defined his life for so long. The Uchiha clan's legacy is one of contradictions, a tale of strength and fragility, of power and loss, of loyalty and betrayal. Their story is a reminder that even the greatest of powers comes with a price, and that no one, not even the most powerful, can escape the burden of their own choices. The Uchiha were a clan that sought peace, but their quest for power and recognition led them down a path that would ultimately destroy them. But even in their destruction, the Uchiha left a legacy that would shape the future of the shinobi world. Their eyes, their bloodline, and their ideals would live on, influencing the course of history for generations to come. The story of the Uchiha clan is a story of tragedy, yes, but it is also one of hope, the hope that even in the face of darkness, there is always the possibility of redemption. After the death of the first Hokage, Hashirama Senju, the Hidden Leaf Village was left to face the challenge of preserving his legacy, a village founded on the ideals of peace, unity, and strength. The weight of this responsibility fell upon the shoulders of his younger brother, Tobirama Senju, the man who would become the second Hokage. Tobirama was a man of different temperament than his older brother. While Hashirama embodied the dream of peace and harmony, Tobirama was a pragmatist, deeply aware of the harsh realities of the shinobi world. He understood that strength alone could not secure the village's future, but it was a necessary tool, a tool that needed to be wielded wisely. Where Hashirama sought unity, Tobirama focused on the measures needed to protect that unity from the constant threats posed by the world around them. The world of the shinobi was unforgiving. To survive in a land ravaged by war and political intrigue, the village needed structure, laws, and a firm hand. Tobirama was the man to provide it. He worked tirelessly to solidify the systems that would ensure Konoha's strength in the face of the unknown. Under his guidance, the village's military structure was refined, and the foundations of the shinobi system were laid out more firmly than ever before. It was during Tobirama's time as Hokage that the concept of the ninja rank was formalized, the structure that would define the shinobi world for centuries. From the lowly genin, who carried out the simplest of missions, to the powerful keiki, who would guide the villages with wisdom and strength, Tobarama's leadership set the standard for how the shinobi system would operate. But Tobirama's role in shaping Konoha's future went beyond military organization. He was also a visionary, understanding that for the village to thrive, it needed more than just warriors. It needed stability, and stability required a government structure that could withstand the inevitable pressures of time. As a result, he established the Council of Elders, a governing body made up of the village's most respected members. Through this council, decisions regarding the village's future, its alliances, and its relations with the other villages could be made in a balanced and fair manner. Though he was a man of logic and reason, Tobirama never lost sight of the ideals that had driven his brother Hashirama to create the village in the first place. Tobirama knew that the road to peace was long, fraught with dangers, and lined with sacrifices. He believed that Konoha's survival depended not only on strength, but on diplomacy, on understanding the hearts and minds of those around them. Yet despite his forward-thinking approach to governance, Tobirama's time as Hokage was not without controversy. His policies regarding the Uchiha clan, in particular, were a source of deep division within the village. Tobirama, having witnessed the destructive potential of the Uchiha clan firsthand, believed that the Uchiha's power, particularly their Sharingan, was a threat to the village's security. As a result, he took steps to limit their influence within the village, a decision that would have lasting consequences for both Konoha and the Uchiha clan. While Tobirama's actions were motivated by a desire to protect the village, they only deepened the mistrust and resentment that the Uchiha already felt toward Konoha. The Uchiha, once an integral part of the village's foundation, began to feel like outsiders in their own home. This sense of alienation would grow over time, fueling the tensions that would eventually lead to the tragic Uchiha massacre. Tobirama was not unaware of the weight of his decisions. He knew that his actions might one day come back to haunt him, but he also believed that the village's survival was paramount. And so, with a heavy heart, he made the decisions he felt were necessary, even if they would leave scars that would take generations to heal. Despite the difficulties he faced, Tobirama's time as Hokage was marked by growth. Under his leadership, Konoha became more organized, more resilient, and more capable of defending itself against the threats that lurked beyond its borders. His legacy, while often overshadowed by his older brother's dream of peace, was one of pragmatic strength and unyielding determination. Tobirama's leadership also marked the beginning of a new era for Konoha. With his guidance, the village became a central player in the world of the shinobi. It was not just a village of warriors, but a village of diplomats, scholars, and leaders. Tobirama's vision was one of a village that could stand strong in the face of any challenge, a village that could not only survive, but thrive in a world that seemed to be built on chaos. Yet despite his many accomplishments, Tobirama's time as Hokage was short-lived. He was eventually killed in battle, leaving behind a legacy that would continue to shape Konoha for generations. But his death, like so many before him, was a reminder of the fragility of life in the shinobi world, where strength and power were often the only things that kept one alive. Tobirama's passing left Konoha at a crossroads. The village had been shaped by his leadership, but now it needed a new direction, one that could carry the legacy of both Hashirama's dream and Tobirama's pragmatism into the future. The mantle of Hokage would pass to a new generation, one that would face even greater challenges than those who came before. But even in his death, Tobirama's influence lived on. The systems he put in place, the structures he built, and the decisions he made would serve as the foundation upon which Konoha would continue to grow. His legacy was not one of perfect peace, but of unwavering strength, of leadership in the face of adversity, and of the recognition that sometimes the greatest sacrifices are made in the name of a future that cannot yet be seen. And so, the story of the Hidden Leaf Village continued, shaped by the vision of the first Hokage and the pragmatic strength of the second. Tobirama's legacy, like that of his brother, would continue to inspire those who came after him, those who believed that even in the darkest times, there was always hope for a brighter future. In the wake of the passing of both the first and second Hokage, the Hidden Leaf Village faced an uncertain future. The foundational ideals that had been established by Hashirama Senju and Tobirama Senju, though strong, had been tested by time, and the village now had to confront the challenges of growing beyond their founder's vision. Konoha was still a young village, fragile in many ways, and the struggles of its early years were filled with both triumph and sorrow. The Hidden Leaf, like all great shinobi villages, was not built in a day, nor was it free from the scars of its past. Even as the village grew stronger in the aftermath of Hashirama and Tobirama's leadership, it remained plagued by the divisions and rivalries that were all too common in the world of shinobi. The power of the Uchiha clan, once an integral part of the village's foundation, had begun to unravel, and the tensions between them and the rest of the village only deepened with time. These early struggles would eventually set the stage for some of the most defining events in Konoha's history. For those living within the village's walls, life was a delicate balance between the ideals of peace and the harsh realities of the shinobi world. Even as the village's infrastructure grew more solid under the guidance of Tobirama, it still struggled to maintain the peace that Hashirama had envisioned. The village's strength was constantly tested by outside threats, internal strife, and the weight of its own history. The younger generation of shinobi, who were raised in the shadow of the great founders, knew only that their lives were shaped by the ideals of those who came before them. But they also understood that peace was not something easily won, nor was it something that could be taken for granted. In those early years, the Hidden Leaf found itself under the looming threat of the other great shinobi villages. The Hidden Mist, the Hidden Sand, and the Hidden Stone, each of them carried their own ambitions, their own desires for power and control. The shinobi world was one of constant competition, where alliances were fragile, and the pursuit of peace seemed as fleeting as a passing breeze. For Konoha to survive, it had to prove its strength, not just in battle, but in diplomacy, in strategy, and in the relationships it cultivated with other villages. It was a time of growth, but also of reflection. As Konoha's leaders struggled to maintain their grip on the future, the people of the village were left to carry on the ideals of the past. The shadow of war loomed over them, and the scars of past conflicts were still fresh in the hearts of those who had lived through them. Even as the hidden leaf flourished, the people knew that they could not afford to forget the lessons of the past, the sacrifices that had been made, the lives lost, and the dreams of those who had given everything for the village's survival. In the midst of this struggle, the village's shinobi were called upon to carry out missions of great importance. Konoha's young warriors, many of them still children in the eyes of the world, were thrust into the crucible of battle, each mission serving as a test of their strength, their loyalty, and their resolve. These early missions were often dangerous, filled with uncertainty, and the consequences of failure were dire. Yet, despite the dangers they faced, the shinobi of Konoha pressed forward, driven by the knowledge that the future of the village, and indeed the world, rested on their shoulders. The early years of Konoha's existence were defined by a sense of survival, by the constant effort to prove that the village could endure. The shinobi who emerged from these early struggles were hardened by the trials they faced, but they also carried with them the hopes and dreams of those who had come before. The sacrifices of the first and second Hokage and the pain of the Uchiha clan's fall from grace were not easily forgotten. They lived on in the hearts of those who continued to walk the path of the shinobi. For the people of Konoha, the early years were a time of transformation. They were forced to confront the reality that peace was not something that could simply be achieved through force, but something that had to be worked for, nurtured, and protected. The world of shinobi was a harsh one, where the line between friend and foe was often blurred, and the price of peace was steep. But even in the face of such adversity, there was always hope, hope that the ideals of the first Hokage would someday be realized, that the legacy of Konoha would be one of unity and strength. This hope was carried by the young generation of shinobi, many of whom would go on to shape the future of the village in ways they could never have imagined. They were the sons and daughters of the warriors who had fought and bled for Konoha's survival, and their lives were shaped by the same ideals that had guided their parents. The younger generation of shinobi had their own dreams, dreams of a world where the endless cycle of war could finally be broken, where their children could grow up in peace, free from the fear of battle. But these dreams were not easily realized. The shadows of the past, the wars, the betrayals, and the loss still hung over Konoha. The village, though growing, was still vulnerable. It was in this time of fragility that the village's true strength would be tested, not just in battle, but in the way the shinobi of Konoha would choose to live, to fight, and to protect one another. The early years of Konoha's existence were a time of laying the foundation for the future, of sowing the seeds of what would one day become a great village. The struggles of those early days, though difficult and fraught with uncertainty, were the crucible in which Konoha's future would be forged. It was through these trials that the true strength of the Hidden Leaf Village would be revealed, not in its walls, not in its armies, but in the hearts of the people who called it home. And so, as the village began to emerge from the shadow of its past, the young shinobi of Konoha carried forward the dreams of their predecessors. The future was uncertain, the road ahead filled with challenges. But there was one thing that was clear. The spirit of Konoha, the spirit of hope and unity, would endure. Through the struggles, the sacrifices, and the pain, Konoha would continue to grow, to heal, and to carry the torch of peace forward into a new era. In the quiet years that followed the struggles of Konoha's earlier days, the village seemed to settle into a kind of uneasy peace. The shadow of the past, the betrayals, and the wars that had once threatened the village now seemed far behind as the village's people began to find their place in a world that, though scarred, held the possibility of brighter days ahead. The Hidden Leaf Village, under the leadership of the third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, would grow stronger, more stable, but even the calmest of waters can hide the fiercest of storms. Hiruzen Sarutobi was a man who embodied the spirit of Konoha. He was not just a leader, but a symbol of everything the village stood for: peace, unity, and perseverance. Under his watch, the village flourished. The memory of Hashirama's dream lived on in him, and he governed not just with strength, but with compassion, always seeking to guide Konoha's shinobi not only to greatness, but to a place of inner peace. Hiruzen was a man of balance, never forgetting the cost of the sacrifices that had been made for Konoha's survival. He understood the weight of the Hokage's crown, that it was not simply a position of power, but of responsibility, of protection, and above all, of guidance. The third Hokage's wisdom was something that earned him the love and respect of his people, for he ruled with both a firm hand and a gentle heart. But even in a time of relative peace, the darkness of the past still loomed. The war between the shinobi villages, though dormant for many years, had never truly ended. Tensions simmered beneath the surface, and it was only a matter of time before something would stir the fragile peace that had been so carefully constructed. The enemies of Konoha were always waiting for the right moment to strike, and that moment would come with the return of an old foe, Orochimaru. Orochimaru, once a beloved student of the third Hokage, had long since fallen from grace. His pursuit of forbidden jutsu, his thirst for immortality, and his dark ambitions had driven him to betray Konoha. His departure from the village was marked by a trail of destruction, and though he had vanished into the shadows, his presence was never truly forgotten. In the silence of the village's peace, the whispers of his name lingered like an unspoken threat, a shadow waiting to return. And return he did. Orochimaru's return was not subtle. He came not with a simple challenge, but with a devastating force: the invasion of Konoha. His plan was not one of stealth, but of overwhelming power. He sought to destroy the very village that had once been his home, to bring down the Hokage who had been both his teacher and his rival. But his motives were not just personal. Orochimaru sought to ignite a war that would ravage the shinobi world, to claim the power he had always craved, and to prove to the world that no one could stand in his way. The invasion of Konoha, led by Orochimaru and his ally, the Hidden Sound Village, was a moment of great tragedy and deep loss. The village, which had once known peace, was plunged into chaos. The streets that had once been filled with the laughter of children now echoed with the sounds of battle. The very foundation of Konoha was shaken to its core as Orochimaru unleashed a series of devastating attacks upon the village. But even in the midst of this darkness, the strength of Konoha's shinobi was tested, and they did not falter. The third Hokage, though aged and weary, stood as a pillar of strength. He knew that the time had come to make the ultimate sacrifice to protect his people. With courage in his heart and the weight of the village on his shoulders, Hiruzen Sarutobi faced Orochimaru in a final battle, a battle that would determine not just the fate of Konoha, but the very soul of the village. In their confrontation, the third Hokage fought not just for Konoha, but for the future of the shinobi world itself. He knew that Orochimaru's ambitions, if left unchecked, would bring about the end of all that he had worked to build. And so, with a heart full of resolve, Hiruzen gave everything he had, his life, his chakra, and his very spirit, to stop Orochimaru's reign of terror. The battle was fierce, and in the end, Hiruzen's strength proved to be too much for Orochimaru to overcome. But it was not without cost. The third Hokage, though victorious, knew that his time had come. His body, frail and battered from the battle, could not withstand the immense strain of the jutsu he had used to defeat his former student. With the knowledge that his life had been given for the good of the village, Hiruzen Sarutobi passed from this world, leaving behind a legacy of wisdom, love, and sacrifice. His death was a profound loss for Konoha. The village mourned the passing of a man who had been both its heart and its protector. The loss of the third Hokage was not just the loss of a leader, but the loss of a guiding light, a symbol of everything that Konoha stood for. His death marked the end of an era, but it also marked the beginning of a new chapter for the village. In the wake of Hiruzen's passing, the people of Konoha were left to pick up the pieces. The village was shaken, but its spirit remained unbroken. The third Hokage's legacy lived on in the hearts of his people, in the ideals he had instilled, in them, and in the strength of the shinobi who had stood up by his side. And though the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, the spirit of Konoha, a spirit of unity, of strength, and of hope, would continue to guide them through even the darkest of times. After the death of the third Hokage, Konoha found itself at a crossroads. The village had been shaken by the invasion, the loss of a beloved leader, and the realization that the peace it had worked so hard to maintain could so easily be torn asunder. It was in this moment of darkness and uncertainty that a new leader would rise to carry the torch of hope, the fourth Hokage, Minato Namikaze. Minato, known as the Yellow Flash for his unmatched speed and incredible skill, was a hero to the people of Konoha. He had been a shinobi of great talent, a student of the third Hokage, and a protector of the village. His rise to the position of Hokage was a natural progression, one that seemed destined. Minato's courage and determination were legendary, and when the village needed him most, he stepped forward without hesitation. The early years of Minato's leadership were marked by his unwavering dedication to the safety and future of Konoha. He sought to protect the village not only from external threats, but from the internal challenges that had often caused strife in the past. His leadership was characterized by a calm demeanor, strategic thinking, and an unyielding commitment to peace. Minato's legacy would be shaped by the decisions he made, some of which would alter the course of Konoha's history forever. But Minato's path to greatness was not one without sacrifice. He, like the Hokages before him, was fully aware of the weight of the title he held. The Hokage was more than just a leader. The Hokage was the heart and soul of Konoha, the protector of its people, and the person who carried the hopes of an entire village. Minato knew that to keep Konoha safe, to preserve the peace that had been so hard won, he would have to make difficult decisions and perhaps even more painful sacrifices. It was during the Nine Tails attack on Konoha that Minato's greatest sacrifice was made. The Nine Tails, a monstrous beast of unimaginable power, had once again attacked the village, leaving destruction in its wake. The village's defenses had been shattered, and all hope seemed lost. In the midst of this chaos, Minato made the ultimate decision to save his village. With the love of a father and the duty of a Hokage, he sealed the Nine Tails within his newborn son, Naruto Uzumaki. This decision, though one of love and sacrifice, would come to define Minato's legacy. The sealing of the Nine Tails was not only an act of heroism, but a decision that would change the course of history for Konoha and the entire shinobi world. Minato's hope was that his son, Naruto, would one day grow to become the very thing that Konoha needed, a symbol of strength, resilience, and hope. Yet in that moment of sacrifice, Minato knew the toll it would take on both Naruto and the village. The Nine Tails' power was immeasurable, and the burden placed upon Naruto as the host of the beast would not be an easy one. Minato's sacrifice was not just physical, it was emotional as well. The village, though saved by his actions, would soon learn the truth about Naruto's connection to the Nine Tails. In a world where the shinobi lived by the rule of strength, Naruto, the child who carried the burden of the Nine Tails within him, would face a life filled with both prejudice and isolation. The very people Minato had worked to protect would come to fear his son, seeing him as nothing more than a living weapon, a creature tied to the very beast that had caused so much destruction. Minato's sacrifice was not only one of death, but also of legacy. His son, Naruto, would carry the weight of his actions for the rest of his life, though neither father nor son could have known the full extent of what that would mean. Minato, in his final moments, left Konoha with the knowledge that the future of the village rested in the hands of his child. In a sense, Minato's death was not the end of his legacy, but the beginning of a new chapter. The village that he had loved, the village that had come to trust him, would now look to his son, Naruto, to carry that legacy forward. But even in death, Minato's influence lingered in the village. The people of Konoha, though mourning the loss of their beloved Hokage, recognized that his actions had saved them. Minato's leadership had left an indelible mark on Konoha, one that would be felt for generations to come. His legacy was not just one of power and sacrifice, but of hope, the hope that even in the darkest of times, there was always the possibility of light. Naruto's journey, though difficult, was shaped by the hope Minato had placed in him. While the villagers saw Naruto as little more than a burden, he carried within him the dream of his father, the dream that one day he could become a Hokage who would bring about the peace that Konoha had always sought. The road ahead for Naruto would be long and fraught with challenges, but his father's legacy would guide him, even in the most difficult of times. Minato's role in shaping the future of Konoha was immeasurable. His bravery in the face of destruction, his selflessness in the face of loss, and his unwavering belief in the future of the village set the foundation for the path that Naruto would one day walk. Minato's sacrifice was a testament to the strength of his spirit and the depth of his love for his village, his people, and his son. Though Minato's time as Hokage was short, his legacy would endure for much longer. The lessons he imparted, The ideals he stood for and the sacrifices he made would live on in the hearts of those who followed in his footsteps. The village that he saved would one day grow into a place of strength and peace, a place that would stand as a testament to the fourth Hokage's legacy and the hope he had passed on to his son. The peaceful vision of the Hidden Leaf Village, and indeed the world of the shinobi, was fragile. Though Konoha had weathered many storms, both within and without, the balance that Hashirama Senju had so dearly hoped for seemed forever just out of reach. The ninja world, built on the cycle of violence and power struggles, was bound to fall back into conflict again, as all the other great villages, the hidden mist, the hidden sand, the hidden cloud, and the hidden stone, each held their own ambitions and dreams for control. For generations, these five great villages lived with an understanding, albeit fragile, that cooperation, rather than full scale war, would allow them to survive. However, beneath the surface of each of these villages, resentment, fear, and the desire for dominance festered, and it wasn't long before the simmering tensions would boil over into another great conflict, a war that would devastate the shinobi world, leaving scars on both the villages and the hearts of its people. It was during the Third Great Ninja War that the world would once again be plunged into darkness. The war was one of great tragedy, not only for the immense loss of life, but also for the toll it took on the spirit of the shinobi. Brothers and sisters, sons and daughters would find themselves forced into a battle they didn't choose, one that would take them to the brink of death, leaving behind only the faintest trace of who they had once been. The stakes were higher than ever, with each village fighting not only for survival, but for control, for dominance in a world that no longer seemed to care for ideals of peace. Konoha, though strong, found itself caught in the tides of this war, pushed into alliances and confrontations with the other villages. The Hidden Leaf's strength was well known across the world, and so it was not long before it became embroiled in this conflict, forced to face enemies on all sides. The battles were fought not just on the field, but within the hearts of those who fought. Every victory was bittersweet, every loss immeasurable. For the shinobi of Konoha and all the great villages, the price of victory in war was always steep. During this time, the youngest generation of shinobi, the ones who had been trained by the old guard of warriors, were thrust into the fray. The story of the Third Great Ninja War would be shaped by these young warriors, who would soon become the heart of Konoha's future. Among them were individuals who would come to be known as legends, their names etched in the history of the shinobi world. Figures like Jiraiya, Tsunade, and Orochimaru, the three legendary Sanin. These three young shinobi, each extraordinary in their own right, fought in this war as part of Konoha's elite, each carrying their own burdens, their own aspirations, and their own desires for a future that seemed so distant amid the chaos. Yet the horrors of the Third Great Ninja War were not limited to the battlefield alone. The lives of the shinobi were irrevocably altered by the violence they had witnessed, by the lives they had taken, and by the bonds they had lost. In the end, the war left not only a broken world, but broken people, individuals who had seen too much, sacrificed too much, and who now, having borne witness to the destruction around them, had to rebuild their own sense of purpose. One of the most defining moments of the war for Konoha came with the loss of one of the village's greatest leaders, the fourth Hokage, Minato Namikaze. His death, during the final stages of the war, was a moment that would leave a lasting impact on Konoha, and it would be a loss felt by every shinobi in the village. Minato's passing was not just the loss of a leader, it was the loss of hope itself. In his absence, the village would struggle to find a new path, to find a way to carry on the dreams that he had so tirelessly worked toward. Yet, in the aftermath of the war, the story of the shinobi world was not over. The Hidden Leaf and all the villages embroiled in the conflict would find that the lessons of the Third Great Ninja War were not easily learned. Though the war had ended, its effects would ripple through the hearts of the villagers for generations to come. The trauma, the loss, and the pain of the war would remain long after the last battle had been fought. For Konoha, the question became not how to win a war, but how to heal. How could the spirit of the village, the dreams that had once united them, be rekindled in a world so scarred by violence? How could the shinobi who had fought so fiercely, so courageously, begin to rebuild the bonds they had once shared? The scars of the war, though invisible to the eye, would forever remain in the hearts of those who had lived through it. In the years following the war, the Hidden Leaf village would attempt to find its footing, navigating the complex web of alliances and rivalries that had been woven during the conflict. The wounds of war would take time to heal, but Konoha's true strength lay not in the power of its shinobi, nor in the walls that protected it, but in the resilience of its people, the people who, even after losing everything, refused to give up on the dream of a peaceful world. It was in this world, one that had been shaped by the chaos of war, that a new generation of shinobi would rise, a generation that would carry the weight of the past while forging their own path forward. The lessons of the Third Great Ninja War would be passed down, the sacrifices of the past would not be forgotten, and the hope for peace would continue to burn even in the darkest of times. For the shinobi of Konoha, and indeed for the entire shinobi world, the war was not the end of the story, but merely another chapter in the ongoing struggle for peace, unity, and the future. As the Third Great Ninja War drew to a close, and the ravages of battle slowly began to fade, Konoha, though broken, was not defeated. The village, the heart of the shinobi world, had suffered deeply, but it had also shown resilience. The people of Konoha were bound by the enduring ideals of the village, ideals that had been shaped by the dreams of the first Hokage and carried forward by the sacrifices of the generations that followed. Yet the spirit of Konoha was not alone in carrying the weight of these ideals. A new generation of warriors was about to rise, young shinobi who had been born into a world already scarred by war, loss, and the weights of history. Among them was a child who would become both a symbol of hope and an embodiment of the village's pain, Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto was born in a time of quiet turmoil, just as Konoha was beginning to recover from the devastation of the past. His birth was not one of simple joy, for he was the son of the fourth Hokage, Minato Namikaze, who had died sacrificing his life to protect the village and seal the Nine Tails, the great beast that had once ravaged Konoha within the newborn child. Naruto's very existence was linked to the terror that had once threatened to tear the village apart, and for this reason he was not welcomed with open arms. The villagers, still reeling from the attack of the nine tails, saw Naruto not as a child, but as the very creature that had caused them so much pain. The nine tails had been sealed inside him, and with it, the fear that the beast might one day break free. This fear grew into suspicion, and that suspicion grew into disdain. The villagers, many of whom had lost loved ones during the Nine Tails rampage, could not bear to see the child who carried its essence. To them, Naruto was not a symbol of hope, but a living reminder of their darkest days. From the moment he was born, Naruto was isolated. As an orphan, his mother, Kushina Uzumaki, had died giving birth to him. Naruto was left to grow up without the love and care that every child deserves. He was rejected, shunned by his own people, and left to navigate the world alone. His childhood was filled with loneliness and hardship, his heart heavy with the knowledge that the villagers hated him for something he could not control. But even in the face of such adversity, Naruto's spirit remained unbroken. Though he longed for the acceptance of those around him, he never gave up on his dreams. His greatest desire was to be acknowledged, to prove that he was more than just the nine tails, that he was a person worthy of respect, of friendship, and of love. He dreamed of becoming Hokage, the leader of Konoha, the very position his father had once held, not only to gain the village's recognition, but to protect those who had once ignored him. It was this dream, this unshakable hope, that would define his journey. Naruto's early years were marked by hardship and rejection. He struggled in school, often finding himself the target of cruel jokes and taunts. His classmates, unaware of the burden he carried, mocked him for his unruly behavior and his lack of discipline. Yet even in the face of this cruelty, Naruto refused to give up. He pushed forward, driven by his dream of becoming Hokage. Every setback only fueled his determination, and every failure only made him more resilient. His heart, though scarred by the pain of loneliness, was filled with an unyielding fire. As he grew older, Naruto began to form bonds with others, first with his fellow members of Team 7, Sasuke Uchiha and Sakura Haruno, and later with his sensei, Kakashi Hatake. These relationships, though initially strained, became the foundation of his strength. Sasuke, though distant and often aloof, would become his rival and his closest friend. Sakura, though initially dismissive of him, would come to understand and care for him. And Kakashi, though enigmatic and often detached, would become a mentor, teaching Naruto not just the skills of a shinobi, but the lessons of friendship, sacrifice, and perseverance. Despite the hardships he faced, Naruto's heart was pure. He cared deeply for those around him, even when they had shown him nothing but disdain. His belief in the goodness of people, in the possibility of change, was what set him apart from others. Where others saw enemies, Naruto saw friends. Where others saw failure, Naruto saw opportunity. He refused to let the darkness of his past define his future. Naruto's journey was not just one of physical strength, but of emotional growth. As he faced the challenges of being a shinobi, he also faced the challenge of overcoming the scars of his childhood. He struggled with feelings of inadequacy, of being unworthy of the love and respect he so desperately craved. But through it all, Naruto never lost sight of his dream. He believed deep down that one day he would be accepted, that one day he would prove his worth to the people of Konoha. And as his journey continued, Naruto's strength grew. not just in terms of his abilities as a shinobi, but in his capacity to forgive, to understand, and to accept those around him. His greatest strength was not his ability to fight or to win battles, but his ability to connect with others, to see beyond their flaws, and to believe in their potential. The villagers, who had once seen him as nothing more than the nine tails within a child's body, slowly began to see him for who he truly was, a young man with a heart full of dreams, a young man who, despite the hardships he had endured, never gave up on the village that had rejected him. Naruto's journey was not just about becoming Hokage. It was about finding his place in the world, about forging his own path, and about showing the world that even the most broken of hearts can heal. The birth of Naruto Uzumaki, though marked by tragedy and rejection, was also the beginning of something beautiful. It was the beginning of a story of resilience, of hope, and of the unyielding belief that even in the darkest times, there is always a way forward. Naruto's life would be one of great challenges, but it would also be one of great triumphs. His story was not just about becoming Hokage, it was about becoming the person he had always dreamed of being, someone who was accepted, loved, and respected by all. As Naruto Uzumaki grew older, the weight of his past continued to shape him. The villagers, though slowly beginning to acknowledge his existence, still saw him as the living embodiment of the nine tails, the very beast that had once ravaged their home. They feared him, rejected him, and yet Naruto never wavered. He refused to be defined by the hatred that surrounded him. Instead, he chose to define himself by his actions, by his heart, and by the unwavering dream that had driven him since childhood to become Hokage. Naruto's early years were a constant struggle for recognition. He had no family, no support system beyond the sensei who reluctantly trained him and the friends who stood by him despite the odds. His bond with his teacher, Iruka Umino, was particularly significant in these formative years. Iruka saw Naruto not as the Nine Tails, but as a child in need of guidance, care, and understanding. Iruka became a father figure to Naruto, offering him a glimpse of what it might feel like to be loved, even if only for a brief moment. This relationship was crucial in Naruto's development, helping him to believe that there was a good in the world, even if it had been hard to find. Despite the emotional isolation he faced, Naruto showed a resilience that few could understand. While others saw him as troublesome, reckless, and unpredictable, Naruto's actions were rooted in a deep longing for connection. He often acted out, seeking attention in any form, even if it was negative, because the alternative, being invisible, was far worse to him. The loneliness he felt was his constant companion, but it did not define him. Instead, it pushed him forward toward his goal of becoming someone who mattered, someone who could not only protect the village, but also earn the love and respect of those who had cast him aside. As a young shinobi, Naruto's strength began to grow, not just in terms of his physical abilities, but in his understanding of the world around him. He started out as a misfit, often failing his missions or finding himself at odds with his classmates. But slowly, the lessons of perseverance, teamwork, and responsibility began to sink in. Naruto's journey was not only one of physical prowess, but of emotional maturation. Each new trial, each new challenge, helped him to understand what it meant to be a true shinobi, to protect those who could not protect themselves, and to learn the true meaning of selflessness. Naruto's relationships with his team members, Sakura Haruno and Sasuke Uchiha, were vital to his development. Though initially a bit of an outcast, Naruto found a sense of camaraderie with his fellow ninjas, despite their differences. His bond with Sakura was one of complex dynamics. Though she initially viewed him as immature and unworthy of her attention, over time she began to see past his rough exterior and recognize the strength in his heart. Sakura, who struggled with her own feelings of inadequacy, found comfort in Naruto's unyielding determination and unwavering belief in his own worth. Together, they became a team, each member learning and growing from the others. But it was Naruto's relationship with Sasuke that would define much of his early years. And Sasuke, the prodigy of the Uchiha clan, was a far more reserved, serious individual than Naruto. He was distant, cold, and obsessed with revenge. He sought power to avenge his family, which had been slaughtered by his older brother Itachi. From the start, Sasuke was Naruto's rival, yet in many ways, he was also the mirror in which Naruto saw his own desires reflected. Sasuke sought strength for a different reason than Naruto, but both were driven by deep emotional pain, by the longing for something they could not attain. Naruto's desire to connect with Sasuke, to be recognized by him, became an essential part of his journey. Sasuke, though initially rejecting Naruto's overtures, became the one person Naruto admired most. He admired Sasuke's strength, his ability to face adversity without flinching, and his silent determination. But as the bond between them deepened, Naruto began to understand that their paths were different, and that Sasuke's darkness, born from the pain of his past, was something Naruto couldn't easily fix. Still, he never gave up. He continued to fight for Sasuke, not out of a need for approval, but because he genuinely cared about him. This bond between them, complex and fragile, became the heart of Naruto's growth as a shinobi. In time, Naruto's reputation began to grow beyond his position as a mere troublemaker. His missions, though often dangerous, began to highlight his natural abilities as a ninja. Though his techniques were raw and unrefined, Naruto's courage, his unshakable will, and his refusal to back down in the face of adversity set him apart from his peers. He was often underestimated by those around him, but each time he faced a challenge, he rose to meet it with an intensity that few could match. His training under powerful shinobi such as Jiraiya, one of the legendary Sannin, would further hone his skills, but it was Naruto's heart, his determination to never give up, no matter the cost, that would become his most powerful weapon. Yet despite his growth, Naruto's past continued to haunt him. The villagers, though slowly beginning to accept him, still treated him with suspicion. He was still seen as the child of the Nine Tails, a weapon of destruction in their eyes, rather than a person in his own right. Naruto's dream of becoming Hokage, of being recognized, of proving that he was more than the beast within him, became an anchor that kept him grounded, even as his emotional struggles threatened to overwhelm him. But through it all, Naruto never wavered. The pain of rejection, the loneliness, and the isolation only fueled his resolve. He knew that the road ahead would be long and filled with challenges, but he also knew that he had something powerful within him, the will to never give up. His dream of becoming Hokage, though distant, was always within reach, driving him forward toward a future where he could prove himself not only to others, but to himself. And so, Naruto's early years were marked by hardship, growth, and the pursuit of a dream that seemed impossible. But every step he took, every challenge he faced, made him stronger, and every person he met, from his friends to his rivals, taught him something new about himself and the world he lived in. His journey was just beginning, and though the path was uncertain, Naruto knew that he would walk it with his head held high, driven by the unbreakable belief that he could make his dream a reality. Sasuke Uchiha, the last surviving member of the Uchiha clan, was a figure defined by both his strength and his sorrow. Born into one of Konoha's most powerful and prestigious families, Sasuke's life was shaped by an early tragedy that would haunt him for the rest of his days. His family, his entire clan, had been slaughtered by none other than his older brother, Itachi Uchiha. The weight of that loss, the pain of seeing everything he held dear torn away in a single night, set Sasuke on a path of darkness, of revenge, and of an unyielding desire to become stronger. From the moment Sasuke entered Konoha's academy, he was seen as a prodigy, a young shinobi with immense talent, sharp intelligence, and the deadly power of the Sharingan, the Uchiha clan's unique bloodline ability. He was the embodiment of the Uchiha's legacy, their strength and ambition, and yet, beneath the surface, Sasuke carried the scar of his past, the haunting memory of the night when his older brother killed his family. His heart was consumed by one singular desire: revenge. The thought of avenging his clan, of confronting Itachi and making him pay for his actions, became the only thing that mattered to Sasuke. Sasuke's determination to become stronger was unmatched. He pushed himself to the limits, often surpassing his peers, including Naruto Uzumaki, his teammate and rival. Naruto, with his unshakable will and determination, admired Sasuke's strength and often looked up to him, despite their differences. But Sasuke was not driven by a need for camaraderie or friendship. He was driven by an insatiable hunger for power, a hunger that, over time, would begin to consume him. As a member of Team 7, Sasuke formed a bond with Naruto and Sakura Haruno, though it was one marked by rivalry and tension. Naruto, despite the hardships of his own life, was determined to befriend Sasuke, to connect with him, and to prove that he was not just the Nine Tails sealed inside a child. But Sasuke, consumed by his own pain and ambition, could not see the value in such connections. To him, bonds were a weakness, something that would only hold him back from achieving his ultimate goal. The only thing that mattered was his quest for revenge against Itachi. Despite the friction between them, Naruto and Sasuke's bond grew stronger as they trained together and fought side by side. Naruto, ever determined to connect with Sasuke, began to understand the depth of the pain that Sasuke carried. The darkness that clouded Sasuke's heart was not something that could be easily dispelled. It was a shadow that clung to him, a shadow that seemed to grow with every passing day. But still, Naruto believed that Sasuke could find a way out of the darkness, that he could find peace and healing. However, Sasuke's path was already set. His desire for revenge, his need to avenge his clan, was a fire that burned too fiercely to be extinguished. Sasuke's growing obsession with power led him to seek out Orochimaru, a former member of Konoha's elite ninja, the Sannin, who had long since turned to the pursuit of forbidden jutsu. Orochimaru was a dark figure, a man whose quest for immortality and forbidden knowledge had led him down a path of corruption. Yet to Sasuke, Orochimaru represented the key to his power, the power he believed he needed to defeat Itachi. It was through Orochimaru that Sasuke would seek to unlock the true potential of his Sharingan, to push himself beyond the limits of what he had known. When Sasuke left Konoha to join Orochimaru, it was a moment that would forever alter the course of his life. His departure, though driven by a desire for strength, was also a rejection of the bonds that had begun to form around him. He turned his back not only on Konoha, but on the people who had come to care for him: Naruto, Sakura, and even Kakashi, his sensei. Sasuke's journey was one of isolation, one of walking away from everything that might have held him back. To him, the bonds of friendship and loyalty were nothing but chains, preventing him from achieving the ultimate goal of avenging his family. Naruto, unable to accept Sasuke's departure, followed him, desperate to bring him back to Konoha. The battle between Naruto and Sasuke, which took place at the Valley of the End, was a clash not only of strength, but of ideals. Sasuke, now consumed by the promise of power and revenge, fought to sever the last connection he had to his past, to Naruto, to Konoha, to the bonds he had once shared. Naruto, on the other hand, fought not only to protect Sasuke from himself, but to show him that there was more to life than revenge, that there was a way forward, even after pain and loss. The battle was fierce, both physically and emotionally, and it ended with Sasuke's victory. But it was a hollow victory. Sasuke had gained the strength he sought, but in doing so, he had lost the very thing that had once given him meaning: his connection to the people who cared for him. He walked away from the Valley of the End, leaving Naruto broken and bloodied, and left behind the village that had tried to give him a home. Sasuke's decision to leave Konoha marked the beginning of his darker path. Under Orochimaru's tutelage, he grew stronger, his abilities growing at an alarming rate. But with each step he took toward power, he grew further away from the person he had once been. The pain of his past, the desire for revenge, and the pursuit of strength consumed him, until all that was left was a shell of the person who had once been a member of Team 7. And yet, even as Sasuke walked further into darkness, there remained a part of him that longed for the connections he had left behind. The bond between him and Naruto, though fractured, had not been completely severed. Deep within Sasuke's heart, buried beneath the layers of pain and hatred, there remained a flicker of the friendship that had once meant so much to him. But that part of him was hidden, locked away beneath the walls he had built, walls that kept him from accepting the very thing that might have saved him: the love and care of those who had always believed in him. Sasuke's journey was one of tragedy, of power gained at the cost of everything that had once given him meaning. It was a journey that would take him to the brink of destruction, but also one that would ultimately lead him back to the very people he had tried to leave behind. His story was one of redemption, of finding his way back from the darkness, but that path was long, fraught with obstacles, and filled with pain. The journey of Naruto Uzumaki was not one he walked alone. Though his path was often solitary, filled with rejection and hardship, there were those who walked beside him, even when they didn't fully understand him. Among them, Sasuke Uchiha and Sakura Haruno were his closest companions, his teammates, and the ones who, in time, would come to shape his understanding of friendship, rivalry, and love. From the very beginning, Naruto's bond with Sasuke was one of rivalry. Sasuke, a member of the proud and powerful Uchiha clan, was the complete opposite of Naruto in many ways. He was calm, calculated, and focused, driven by the desire to avenge his family and to prove his own strength. Naruto, on the other hand, was loud, brash, and driven by the need for recognition and acceptance. Yet, despite their differences, a deep connection existed between them, one built not on shared goals, but on mutual respect and at times mutual pain. Naruto's admiration for Sasuke ran deep. He saw in Sasuke not just a rival, but a reflection of the strength he himself lacked. Sasuke's ability to remain calm and composed, his skill and talent were traits that Naruto longed to possess. But beneath this admiration was something more, something that Naruto would come to realize as they fought together, trained together, and faced numerous challenges side by side. Sasuke, despite his aloofness and obsession with revenge, was someone Naruto looked up to, not only for his power, but for the bond that they shared as teammates. But for Sasuke, the bond with Naruto was far more complex. At first, Sasuke dismissed Naruto as nothing more than an annoying, loud teammate. He couldn't see beyond Naruto's surface, the boisterous behavior, the need for attention, the rebelliousness that often seemed to draw people away. Sasuke, consumed by his need for revenge against his brother Itachi, had little time for anything or anyone else. The loss of his family, the trauma he had endured, had hardened his heart, and he saw those around him not as companions, but as obstacles or distractions from his goal. Yet over time, Sasuke began to realize that Naruto's persistence, his willingness to fight for others and to never give up, was something he could not ignore. Though Sasuke struggled to admit it, there was a part of him that was drawn to Naruto's unyielding spirit. Where Sasuke saw darkness and isolation, Naruto saw connection, warmth, and the potential for growth. Naruto's belief in Sasuke, in the idea that Sasuke could find redemption, could overcome the darkness within him, was unwavering. And though Sasuke would never admit it, it was this belief, this friendship, that began to chip away at the walls he had built around himself. Sakura Haruno, on the other hand, began her journey with Naruto and Sasuke with a more traditional view of relationships. As a young girl, Sakura had been enamored with Sasuke, seeing him as the ideal shinobi, the one who could do no wrong. Her feelings for him, though genuine, were based more on admiration and infatuation than on a true understanding of who Sasuke was. In the beginning, she had little respect for Naruto, dismissing him as a troublemaker and a nuisance, someone who could never measure up to Sasuke's standards. But as they faced missions together, as they learned and grew alongside one another, Sakura began to see Naruto in a new light. She saw his determination, his unwavering will, and his willingness to sacrifice everything for those he cared about. She began to understand that beneath Naruto's boisterous exterior was a heart full of love and a deep desire to protect others, even when he himself felt like an outsider. Her feelings for Sasuke, while still present, began to shift as she came to understand that Naruto's friendship was something far more meaningful. Over time, Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura formed a bond that was both fragile and unbreakable. It was a bond forged through struggle, through shared pain, and through the belief that together they could overcome any challenge. Despite their differences, despite the complex emotions that bound them together, they were a team. They fought for each other, trained together, and most importantly, learned from one another. Naruto, despite his past, became the glue that held them together, the one who refused to give up on Sasuke, even when Sasuke pushed him away. The most pivotal moment in their relationship came during Sasuke's departure from Konoha. Sasuke, consumed by the desire for power and revenge, left the village in pursuit of Orochimaru, seeking the strength he believed he needed to defeat his brother. For Naruto and Sakura, this was a devastating moment. Naruto, who had long seen Sasuke as his rival, as the person who had pushed him to become stronger, was faced with the reality that his friend was slipping further and further away. And Sakura, who had once idolized Sasuke and had seen him as the key to her own happiness, was left heartbroken, powerless to stop him. The pursuit of Sasuke became Naruto's greatest mission, one that would define his growth as both a shinobi and a person. His refusal to give up on Sasuke, to bring him back to Konoha, to help him find a way out of the darkness, became the central focus of Naruto's journey. The friendship between the three of them was tested to its limits, but the bond they shared, though fractured, was never truly broken. As Naruto set out to bring Sasuke back, he began to understand something crucial, that the bond they shared was not just about strength, but about understanding, about accepting each other's flaws, pain, and weaknesses. Sasuke's quest for power had been driven by pain, by a desire for vengeance, but Naruto's belief in him was driven by love. Love for a friend, for a teammate, for someone who had once walked beside him. In his heart, Naruto knew that Sasuke was not lost forever. He believed that even the deepest darkness could be overcome, that the light of friendship, of love, could guide Sasuke back to the village, back to the bonds they had formed. The story of Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura was one of deep complexity. It was a story of rivalry, of growth, and of redemption. It was a story of how love, both platonic and romantic, could heal even the deepest wounds, and how the bonds of friendship could guide even the most lost souls back to the light. The Chunin exams were a defining moment in the lives of many young shinobi. It was not just a test of their strength or their abilities, but a rite of passage, a proving ground for those who sought to climb the ranks within the shinobi world. For Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura, the exams were a chance to showcase their skills, to prove that they were not merely children or novices, but true shinobi capable of handling the trials of their world. For Naruto, the Chunin exams represented more than just an opportunity for advancement. It was his chance to prove to himself and to those around him that he was more than the 9 tails sealed inside him. It was a moment to show that he could stand on his own, to show that he was worthy of the respect he so desperately craved. Throughout the trials of the Chunin exams, Naruto faced not only powerful adversaries, but his own insecurities, his doubts about whether he could truly make it. And yet, with every challenge, Naruto's resolve strengthened. His belief in himself grew, and his will to never give up became a beacon of light that illuminated his path forward. The first part of the Chunin exams, the written test, was deceptively simple at first glance. However, it was a test not only of intelligence, but of resilience and courage. Naruto, ever the non-traditional student, struggled with the written portion of the exam, unable to keep up with the high standards set by his peers. He was mocked by the other contestants, especially by the arrogant genin from the Hidden Sound village, who saw him as an easy target. But Naruto, rather than giving up, found a way to turn the test into a game. He sought out his own answers, relying on his instincts and his own brand of unshakable determination. When the test results were announced, Naruto found that he had passed, not because of his intelligence, but because of his unyielding will to succeed, his refusal to back down in the face of adversity. It was a small victory, but for Naruto, it was a powerful reminder that he had something within him that could not be measured by conventional means. It was the beginning of a journey, not just as a shinobi, but as someone who would one day prove himself to the world. The next phase of the Chunin exams brought the young competitors face to face with their greatest challenges yet, the one-on-one tournament-style battles. This was where the true strength of each participant would be tested and where friendships would be strained, rivalries ignited, and the ultimate fate of the competitors sealed. Sasuke, Naruto, and Sakura each faced opponents who tested their abilities to the limit. For Sasuke, it was his moment to prove his strength, not just to those around him, but to himself. The young Uchiha faced off against Kinetichi, a skilled genin from the Hidden Sand, who pushed Sasuke to his limits. Throughout the fight, Sasuke's resolve was tested, and his desire for strength, the desire that had been forged in the fires of his tragedy, became the driving force behind his victory. Yet even as he won, he knew that his quest for power was far from over. It would never truly be enough until he had avenged his clan. Naruto's own fight was against Neji Hyuga, a member of the esteemed Hyuga clan and a prodigy in his own right. Neji, whose pride was as sharp as his skills, saw Naruto as a mere underdog, someone who didn't belong in the same league as him. But Naruto, in typical fashion, refused to accept that fate. His fight with Neji became more than just a battle of physical prowess. It was a battle of ideals, a clash between the belief that destiny was unchangeable and the conviction that anyone could overcome their past and their limitations. Neji, born into a branch family of the Hyuga clan, had been raised to believe that his future was determined by his birth and his lineage. He had been made to believe that he had no control over his fate. But Naruto, having lived through his own hardships, having fought against a world that constantly told him he didn't belong, refused to accept the idea of fate. He proved in that battle that hard work and perseverance and belief in oneself could overcome even the most rigid of destinies. He emerged victorious, earning Neji's respect and proving to everyone, including himself, that he was capable of much more than anyone had ever given him credit for. Sakura, though not as powerful as her teammates, was no less determined. Her fight was not against a single opponent, but against her own limitations. In the early stages of the exams, she was often overshadowed by the talent of Sasuke and Naruto, but she refused to be left behind. She trained tirelessly, not just in her physical skills, but in her understanding of her own worth. By the time the tournament began, Sakura had transformed from the shy, insecure girl into a determined and capable shinobi. Though she didn't win her match, her growth throughout the process was undeniable, and her willingness to step into battle, despite her own doubts, proved that she was no longer just a bystander in her own life. But the Chunin exams were not just about the fights, the victories, or the recognition of strength. The true test came when the invasion of Konoha began. On the very day the exams were supposed to come to a close, a sinister force revealed itself. The Hidden Sound and the Hidden Sand, two villages whose alliances had been forged in secret, launched an attack on Konoha. The village was thrown into chaos as the sounds of battle rang through the streets. The Hokage, Sarutobi, and his loyal shinobi fought to protect the village. But it soon became clear that this invasion was not just about taking over Konoha. It was a move to destabilize the entire shinobi world, a battle for control, a statement of power. Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura, though initially caught off guard, found themselves thrust into the heart of the conflict. The Chunin exams had, in many ways, prepared them for this moment, but nothing could have prepared them for the sight of their beloved village being torn apart. The invasion was a brutal reminder that the peace Konoha had fought so hard for was fragile, that the world of shinobi was a world of constant strife, where alliances could shift in the blink of an eye, and the cost of survival was often paid in blood. In the midst of this chaos, Naruto's true nature began to shine through. Despite the fear, despite the uncertainty, he stood by his friends, ready to fight, ready to protect the village that had never fully accepted him. Sasuke, with his own dark motivations, fought with the same intensity, though his heart was still clouded by the desire for revenge. Sakura, though still relatively inexperienced, found strength in the people around her, in the bonds that had formed between them. Together, they fought not just for their survival, but for the survival of Konoha, the village that had shaped them, the village they had come to love. The invasion of Konoha marked the beginning of a new chapter for Naruto and his friends. It was a chapter that would be defined by loss, by sacrifice, and by the realization that peace was not something that could be taken for granted. The path ahead was uncertain, and the future was filled with challenges that would test not just their strength, but their hearts. Among the many faces of Konoha, there was one who stood out not only for his extraordinary power, but for his profound influence on the young shinobi who would come to shape the future. Jiraiya, one of the legendary Sannin, was a man whose story was one of triumph and tragedy, of sacrifice and love, of dreams both fulfilled and lost. He was a mentor, a friend, and a protector, not just to Naruto, but to the entire village. Jiraiya was a figure of great strength, known for his mastery of both ninjutsu and senjutsu, his ability to tap into the natural energy of the world. He was a legend in his own right, a man who had traveled the world, sought out knowledge, and faced the darkest forces of the shinobi world. But beneath the bravado and the powerful jutsu, Jiraiya was a man with a deeply emotional heart, a man who carried the weight of his past with him wherever he went. Jiraiya's story began in his early years, long before he became the revered sage and teacher of many young shinobi. Like many in the world of ninjas, Jiraiya's youth was marked by both joy and hardship. He grew up in a time of great turbulence, where the world of the shinobi was constantly at war, and survival often meant sacrificing one's own ideals. He was a student of Hiruzen Sarutobi, the third Hokage, and along with his two fellow students, Orochimaru and Tsunade, became one of the three legendary Sannin, three warriors who would go on to leave their mark on history. Together, Jiraiya, Orochimaru, and Tsunade were considered the pinnacle of shinobi ability. But as they grew older, their paths began to diverge. Tsunade, despite her incredible abilities, chose a quieter path, focused on healing and tending to the needs of the people. Orochimaru, consumed by his hunger for immortality and forbidden knowledge, sought power above all else and eventually betrayed Konoha. But Jiraiya, though no less ambitious, remained steadfast in his love for the village and its people. Jiraiya's greatest challenge came with the rise of the Akatsuki, a group of rogue shinobi whose goal was to collect the powerful tailed beasts, including the 9 tails sealed inside Naruto. In his quest to understand the Akatsuki's true motives, Jiraiya set out on a journey that would take him across the land, facing enemies both old and new, seeking the truth about the world he had always fought to protect. Along the way, he uncovered the shocking truth about the leader of the Akatsuki, a man known as Pain, a man whose identity was tied to Jiraiya's own past. It was during this time that Jiraiya took Naruto under his wing, becoming not just his teacher, but his guide. Though Naruto had always been an outcast, a child with a demon sealed inside him, Jiraiya saw something in him that no one else did, a potential for greatness, a heart that despite everything it had suffered, still burned with hope. Jiraiya took Naruto on a journey of self-discovery, teaching him not just the techniques of a shinobi, but the true meaning of strength, of perseverance, and of what it meant to never give up. In their travels together, Jiraiya imparted to Naruto the importance of understanding one's own pain, of using that pain to fuel one's desire for a better future, and of never letting the darkness of the past define who you were. It was a lesson that would become the cornerstone of Naruto's philosophy, the idea that no matter how deep the wounds or how painful the journey, there was always hope, always a way forward. Yet Jiraiya's own journey would not end in the way he had hoped. The truth about Pain, the true leader of the Akatsuki, was revealed to Jiraiya in a battle that would prove to be his final confrontation. In his effort to understand Pain's motives and stop the Akatsuki's plan, Jiraiya fought with everything he had, but in the end, he was unable to defeat his former pupil. The battle was brutal, and Jiraiya, though powerful, was unable to overcome the combined strength of Pain's abilities. In his final moments, Jiraiya reflected on his life, on the choices he had made, and on the people he had loved. He thought of Tsunade, of the bond they had shared, of the days when they had been young and full of hope. He thought of Naruto, the boy he had mentored, and he realized that despite the pain and the loss, Naruto had the power to change the world. He had always known that Naruto was special, but in those final moments, Jiraiya understood just how important Naruto's future was. Naruto, the boy who had once been the outcast, the one no one had believed in, was destined to be the one to lead the shinobi world toward peace. Jiraiya's death was a devastating blow, not just to Naruto but to Konoha as a whole. Jiraiya had been more than a teacher. He had been a friend, a protector, and a symbol of hope. His passing marked the loss of one of the village's greatest heroes. But even in death, Jiraiya's legacy lived on. The teachings he had imparted to Naruto, the lessons of strength, perseverance, and hope, would guide Naruto as he faced the greatest challenges of his life. In the wake of Jiraiya's death, Naruto was left to carry on his mentor's dream, to continue the fight for peace and understanding that Jiraiya had believed in so strongly. It was a burden that Naruto did not take lightly. but it was a burden he was ready to bear. Jiraiya's death was not just the loss of a great warrior, it was the loss of a father figure, a guide, and a friend. But it was also a reminder to Naruto of what was at stake, that the future of the shinobi world rested on their ability to learn from the past, to forgive, and to move forward together. Jiraiya's legacy was not one of sorrow, but of hope. He had given everything for the village, for his friends, and for the future of the world he had loved. His teachings would live on in the hearts of those he had touched, and through Naruto, the spirit of Jiraiya, the spirit of hope, resilience, and the belief in a better future, would continue to guide the next generation of shinobi. Orochimaru's name was one that resonated with both fear and fascination. He was a figure of immense power, a shinobi whose ambitions surpassed the boundaries of mere mortal existence. His journey, however, began not as an adversary to Konoha, but as a student of the village, a member of the legendary Sanin, alongside Jiraiya and Tsunade. Together, the three had once shared the bonds of friendship, loyalty, and a common purpose: to protect the village they loved and to grow stronger together. But as time passed, Orochimaru's desires began to take a darker turn. The very qualities that had made him a brilliant shinobi, his thirst for knowledge, his insatiable curiosity, and his unyielding desire for power, gradually consumed him. Unlike his friends, who found meaning in the bonds they forged and the lives they touched, Orochimaru's path became one of isolation. He sought something beyond the limits of human life, something that no one else had ever achieved. The pursuit of immortality, the ability to transcend death itself, became his singular obsession. In his quest to achieve immortality, Orochimaru delved into forbidden jutsu, seeking knowledge that was hidden even from the most respected shinobi of Konoha. He experimented with the bodies of others, seeking the perfect vessel to house his soul. His studies led him into dark, uncharted territories, and it wasn't long before he betrayed Konoha in his pursuit of ultimate power. His departure from the village was not just an act of defiance, but a declaration of his intent to reshape the world according to his own vision. Orochimaru's decision to leave Konoha was not just about his personal ambitions. It was also rooted in his belief that the village and its leaders, particularly the Hokage, were too limited in their understanding of true power. Orochimaru believed that the future of the shinobi world could only be secured through the mastery of forbidden arts, the breaking of taboos, and the willingness to sacrifice everything for the pursuit of immortality. His departure from Konoha was marked by a ruthless betrayal. As a former student of the third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, Orochimaru's decision to abandon the village was particularly painful for the Hokage, who had once considered him a trusted ally. Hiruzen's efforts to guide Orochimaru back to the right path, to show him the value of life and the importance of bonds, had failed. Orochimaru, in his obsession with power, turned his back on everything he had once known, embarking on a path of darkness and destruction. After leaving Konoha, Orochimaru began to build his own empire, creating a secret organization known as the Sound Village. His goal was to create an army of powerful shinobi, an army that would be loyal to him alone. But his ambitions were not limited to mere conquest. Orochimaru sought to unlock the secrets of immortality, to transcend the limitations of the human body and achieve the unthinkable. In his quest for this forbidden knowledge, He crossed paths with many powerful figures, from the infamous Akatsuki to the more obscure shinobi, each one a stepping stone on his path to ultimate power. One of Orochimaru's most notorious and significant actions was his attempt to take over the body of Sasuke Uchiha, the last surviving member of the Uchiha clan. Sasuke, with his powerful Sharingan and his innate talent for ninjutsu, was the perfect vessel for Orochimaru's plans. He saw in Sasuke the key to achieving his goal of immortality. By taking Sasuke's body, Orochimaru believed that he would gain the Uchiha's legendary power, furthering his own strength and making him nearly invincible. Sasuke, however, was not the docile pawn that Orochimaru had anticipated. Sasuke, driven by his own deep pain and desire for revenge against his brother Itachi, was a powerful shinobi in his own right. He had long sought the means to surpass his limits, to gain the power to defeat his brother and avenge the massacre of his clan. Orochimaru, seeing this drive within Sasuke, believed that he could control him and use his power to further his own goals. The bond between Sasuke and Orochimaru was one of manipulation and ambition. Sasuke, though initially reluctant to join forces with Orochimaru, eventually accepted the offer, believing that Orochimaru held the key to the power he sought. Orochimaru, on the other hand, saw Sasuke as little more than a tool, a means to an end. He did not care for Sasuke's dreams, nor did he understand the emotional weight that Sasuke carried in his heart. To Orochimaru, Sasuke was merely another vessel, another stepping stone on his path to immortality. As Sasuke spent more time under Orochimaru's tutelage, he began to see the dark side of his mentor. Orochimaru's obsession with power, his willingness to sacrifice everything and everyone in his pursuit of immortality, became more and more apparent. Sasuke, though driven by his own thirst for vengeance, began to question Orochimaru's methods and his motivations. Eventually, Sasuke would decide that he could no longer stay under Orochimaru's control, that he could no longer allow himself to be used by someone whose desires were so self-centered and destructive. Sasuke's decision to leave Orochimaru marked the beginning of a new chapter in his journey, one that would bring him closer to his ultimate goal, but also take him further away from the bonds of friendship and the love he had once known. Sasuke's desire for revenge against Itachi would soon lead him down a path that was as dark and destructive as the one Orochimaru had chosen. And yet, despite the darkness that consumed Sasuke, there remained a part of him that yearned for redemption, for peace, for the bond of friendship that he had once shared with Naruto and the others. Orochimaru, despite Sasuke's defection, continued his pursuit of immortality, seeking new ways to extend his life and further his plans. His actions, though often destructive, were driven by an intense fear of death, a fear that pushed him to take extreme measures in order to escape his mortality. He was willing to sacrifice everything, including his humanity, for the chance to live forever. His legacy would be one of destruction, of pain, and of the tragic consequences of unchecked ambition. But in the end, Orochimaru's quest for immortality would be his undoing. Despite his power, his knowledge, and his ability to manipulate others, he could not escape the inevitable truth that no one, not even a shinobi, as powerful as him, could avoid the consequences of their actions forever. Orochimaru's downfall came not through the strength of others, but through his own hubris. his belief that he could control the forces of life and death. His story serves as a reminder of the dangers of obsession, of the corrupting influence of unchecked ambition, and the price of sacrificing everything in the pursuit of power. Orochimaru's legacy, though marked by his brilliance and his power, is also one of sorrow and loss, a story of a man who sought to escape death, only to find that in doing so, he lost everything that truly mattered. In the world of the shinobi, few organizations were as feared, as enigmatic, and as dangerous as the Akatsuki. This group, once formed with noble intentions, was now a shadow that loomed over the shinobi world. The Akatsuki was not just a collective of rogue shinobi, but a powerful force whose ultimate goal, the capture of the tailed beasts, threatened the balance of power among the five great shinobi villages, and indeed the entire world. The origins of the Akatsuki were as complex as the group itself. It was founded by Yahiko, a young man who, like many others, had grown disillusioned with the constant warfare that plagued the shinobi world. Yahiko's initial vision for the Akatsuki was one of peace. He sought to create a group of like-minded individuals who could protect the innocent and end the cycle of conflict that had ravaged their lives. At its inception, the Akatsuki's goal was to bring about change, to give the oppressed a voice, and to end the suffering caused by the endless wars between the base villages. However, as time passed, the ideals of the Akatsuki were distorted. Yahiko's death, a tragic result of the turmoil and violence in the Hidden Rain village, marked the turning point for the group. After his passing, Nagato, also known as Pain, one of the founding members, took control of the organization. Under Nagato's leadership, the Akatsuki's ideals shifted from the pursuit of peace to the pursuit of power. Nagato, once a hopeful and idealistic young man, was transformed by his experiences into a man who believed that true peace could only be achieved through absolute control, control over life, death, and the very elements that shaped the world. Nagato's vision for the Akatsuki was one of domination, and the capture of the tailed beasts became the cornerstone of that vision. The tailed beasts, ancient and powerful creatures born from the very fabric of the world's chakra, were seen as the ultimate weapons. They had the power to destroy entire villages and reshape the world itself. Each tailed beast was an uncontrollable force of nature, and Nagato believed that by collecting them, he could create a new order, one where peace could be imposed from the top down. The Akatsuki's strategy was simple, yet devastating. They would seek out the Jinchuriki, the human hosts of the tailed beasts, and capture them, extracting the beasts from their bodies to use as weapons. The first targets were the Jinchuriki of the various villages, the hosts who carried within them the immense power of the tailed beasts. Each capture was a carefully orchestrated mission, a race against time and the village's defenses. The members of the Akatsuki were a formidable force, each one a master of their craft, each one driven by their own motives. Among them were individuals of great power and complexity, each with their own tragic backstory and twisted sense of purpose. The group was not made up of faceless villains, but of individuals who had been shaped by the harsh realities of the shinobi world. They were people who had lost faith in the possibility of peace through understanding and cooperation, and who believed that only through destruction could a new world be born. Pain, the leader of the Akatsuki, was a tragic figure in his own right. Once a child of war, Pain had lost everything: his family, his home, and his innocence to the violence of the shinobi world. His desire for peace was born from that loss, but it became corrupted by the suffering he endured. Pain believed that the only way to end the endless cycle of violence was to control it, to force the world into submission. His vision of peace was one of absolute authority, where all conflict would cease only when the world was united under his rule. In contrast to Pain's ideal of control, Naruto's vision of peace was one of hope, of understanding, and of connection. The clash between these two ideologies would shape the future of the shinobi world. While Pain sought to force peace through power and fear, Naruto believed that peace could only be achieved through trust, cooperation, and the bonds between people. This fundamental difference in worldview would become the heart of the conflict between Naruto and the Akatsuki. The Akatsuki's efforts to collect the tailed beasts brought them into direct conflict with the five great shinobi villages. Each village, with its own vested interest in protecting the tailed beasts, saw the Akatsuki as a threat to their survival. The Akatsuki's actions set off a chain of events that would lead to the Fourth Great Ninja War, a war that would bring the villages to the brink of destruction and test the strength of the alliances formed in the face of common enemy. As the Akatsuki members captured more and more of the tailed beasts, their power grew, and so did their influence. With each victory, they grew closer to their goal of world domination, but their actions were not without consequence. The villages, though divided by their own rivalries and fears, began to unite against the common threat. The power of the Akatsuki was undeniable, but so too was the resilience of the shinobi world. The villages, despite their scars and their histories of conflict, found strength in their bonds, and together they began to push back against the tide of destruction brought on by the Akatsuki. As the conflict intensified, Naruto, the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails, became a central figure in the struggle against the Akatsuki. His journey, one of personal growth, was now intertwined with the fate of the entire shinobi world. His belief in the power of friendship and his refusal to give up on others became the key to unlocking the strength of the people around him. But even with his unwavering determination, the challenge before him was monumental. The Akatsuki, though divided by their individual goals, were united in their singular mission. Each member brought their own unique skills and abilities to the group, creating a force that was nearly unstoppable. Yet despite their power, there remained a crack in their foundation, a crack that would eventually lead to their downfall. The bonds that held them together were fragile, and as the war intensified, those cracks began to widen. The ideology of pain, though powerful, was ultimately flawed. And as the battle for the tailed beasts raged on, the true meaning of peace and the true cost of that peace began to take shape. The clash between Naruto's ideals and Pain's vision was inevitable. The stakes were higher than ever before, and the outcome would shape the future of the shinobi world. Could Naruto, the boy who had once been rejected by his village, overcome the darkness of his own past and change the world? Could the bonds of friendship, love, and understanding truly triumph over the forces of destruction, fear, and hatred? The Fourth Great Ninja War was unlike any conflict the shinobi world had ever faced. It was a war of unimaginable scale, a battle that would see the five great shinobi villages joined forces to face the Akatsuki in their quest to collect the tailed beasts. But this war was not just about survival. It was about the very future of the shinobi world, about the possibility of a world where peace could finally be achieved, a world where the cycle of war and suffering could end. At the heart of the conflict was the clash between two vastly different visions of peace. On one side, there was Pain, the leader of the Akatsuki, whose vision of peace was one of control and domination. Pain believed that only through the absolute submission of the world's shinobi could true peace be attained. He believed that by forcing the world to unite under his rule, through the power of the tailed beasts and the fear he could instill in others, he could bring about an end to the endless cycle of conflict. His vision, though powerful, was rooted in fear and violence, a peace born not from understanding, but from the absolute domination of others. On the other side stood Naruto Uzumaki, a young shinobi who had grown up rejected by his own village, yet had never given up on the possibility of peace. Naruto's vision of peace was fundamentally different from Pain's. For Naruto, peace was not something that could be imposed from the top down, but something that could only be achieved through understanding, connection, and the bonds that could be formed between people. He believed that even the darkest hearts could be healed, that even those who had lost their way could find redemption if only they were given the opportunity. The battle between these two visions, Pain's and Naruto's, was not just a battle of strength, but a battle of ideals. And it was a battle that would ultimately define the course of the Fourth Great Ninja War. As the war raged on, the shinobi alliances, once divided by their own rivalries and fears, were forced to put aside their differences and unite against the Akatsuki. The stakes were higher than ever before, as the Akatsuki grew stronger with each tailed beast they captured, and the lives of countless innocents hung in the balance. The villages, though wary of one another, knew that if they didn't stand together, they would all be destroyed. The survival of the shinobi world depended on their ability to work as one. In the midst of this chaos, Naruto continued to grow as a shinobi, but more importantly, as a leader. He had always been driven by his desire to be recognized, to prove to the world that he was more than just the nine tails sealed inside him. But as the war progressed, Naruto's understanding of what it meant to be a true leader deepened. He began to understand that true strength was not just about power, but about the ability to inspire others, to protect them, and to never give up on them, no matter how hopeless the situation seemed. One of Naruto's most significant moments came when he faced off against Pain in a battle that would test not only his physical abilities, but his emotional and philosophical beliefs. Pain, having once been a child of war like Naruto, sought to force his vision of peace onto the world. He believed that only through the suffering of others could true peace be achieved. His methods, though brutal, were rooted in his own pain and the loss he had suffered. For Pain, the world was a place of constant conflict, where the strong prevailed and the weak were trampled. Naruto, however, saw the world differently. He had known pain too, but rather than letting it consume him, he had used it as fuel to fight for something better. For Naruto, peace could not be achieved through force or fear. It had to come from understanding, from connecting with others, and breaking down the barriers that divided them. Naruto's greatest strength was his ability to forgive, to see the good in others, even in those who had caused him the greatest pain. When Naruto confronted pain, he did not come as a warrior seeking revenge or retribution. He came as a man seeking understanding. He came with the belief that even pain, the leader of the Akatsuki, could be redeemed. And through his words and his actions, Naruto was able to show pain a different path, a path not of domination, but of forgiveness and understanding. It was a pivotal moment in the war, one that would change the course of the battle and redefine Naruto's role as a leader. But while Naruto's victory over pain was a significant turning point, the war was far from over. The Akatsuki, though weakened by the loss of their leader, still posed a deadly threat to the shinobi world. And the true mastermind behind the war, Tobi, also known as Uchiha Obito, had yet to reveal himself. Tobi's ultimate goal was not just the capture of the tailed beasts, but the creation of a new world, one where the cycle of pain and suffering would be eradicated entirely. However, his plan, like Pain's, was rooted in fear, in control, and in the destruction of individuality. The final stages of the war would test the shinobi world in ways it had never been tested before. With Tobi's true intentions revealed and the stakes higher than ever, Naruto would be forced to confront not just the physical enemies in front of him, but the deeper, more profound battle within himself. He would have to confront his own doubts, his own fears, and his own understanding of what it truly meant to fight for peace. As the war continued, alliances would be tested, friendships would be strained, and sacrifices would be made. But through it all, Naruto's unwavering belief in the possibility of peace, a peace born from understanding and connection rather than domination, would serve as a beacon of hope for the shinobi world. His journey, though filled with loss and hardship, would ultimately lead to a new era for the world of shinobi. And as the final battle loomed, Naruto knew that he would fight not just for his village, but for the future of all the villages, and for a world where peace could finally be more than just a dream. The Fourth Great Ninja War had escalated to unimaginable heights. What began as a struggle for control of the tailed beasts had morphed into a battle for the very survival of the shinobi world. In the face of overwhelming odds, the combined forces of the five great villages fought side by side, their bonds tested, their resolve challenged, as they sought to protect their future from those who sought to plunge them back into darkness. At the heart of the conflict was Naruto Uzumaki, the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails, whose journey from a rejected child to a powerful shinobi was not just about strength, but about the belief that peace, true peace, was possible. Throughout the war, Naruto had grown not only in his abilities, but in his understanding of what it meant to be a leader, to carry the hopes of his people, and to fight for a future where understanding and connection could triumph over fear and hatred. His path had been long, filled with pain and loss, but it had shaped him into a man who believed that the bonds formed between people were the most powerful weapon of all. But even as Naruto grew stronger, the war took its toll. The enemies they faced were not only powerful, but driven by ideologies that contradicted Naruto's own. The mastermind behind much of the conflict was Tobi, or Uchiha Obito, a man whose tragic past had warped his understanding of peace and led him down a path of destruction. Obito's plan was simple, yet devastating: to create a world of endless dreams, a world where pain and suffering no longer existed. However, this world would come at the cost of the very essence of freedom, individuality, and life itself. The peace Obito sought was a peace born from control, from the denial of true emotion and human connection. Naruto, having come to understand the importance of bonds, knew that Obito's vision was flawed. To Naruto, the true path to peace lay not in forcing others to live in a dream world, but in allowing people to experience the pain and growth that came with life itself. He believed that by understanding one another's pain, by connecting with each other, and sharing in the human experience, a lasting peace could be achieved. This was a belief he held deep in his heart, and it was what drove him to continue fighting, even when all seemed lost. As the war entered its final stages, the stakes became higher than ever before. Toby, having revealed his true identity as the leader of the Akatsuki, made his final move. His goal was to complete the Moon's Eye plan, a plan that would use the power of the tailed beasts and the Moon's Eye to cast an eternal genjutsu on the entire world, trapping everyone in an illusion where they would live in peace, free from the pain of the real world. But this peace would come at a terrible price, the destruction of the world as they knew it. Naruto, along with his allies, faced the overwhelming forces of Obito and his army of the dead. Even as they fought with everything they had, it became clear that Obito's plan was too far along, and the world as they knew it was on the brink of destruction. Yet despite the odds, Naruto never wavered. He believed that there was always hope, always a way to overcome even the darkest of times. The final confrontation between Naruto and Obito was not just a battle of strength, but of ideals. It was a battle between two individuals whose experiences had shaped their views of the world. Obito, having suffered the loss of his closest friend Rin, had given up on the possibility of a better world, believing that peace could only be achieved through absolute control. Naruto, on the other hand, believed that even in the face of pain and suffering, there was always the potential for growth, for healing, and for connection. During this final battle, Naruto found himself not only fighting for his own survival, but for the survival of the world. But more than that, he was fighting for the very ideals that he had held on to throughout his entire journey, the belief that the bonds between people were the key to peace, that love and understanding could overcome any darkness. He was fighting for the dream of a world where the cycle of hatred and pain could finally be broken. As the battle reached its climax, Naruto and his allies faced an impossible choice. Obito's vision was slowly becoming a reality, and the world seemed to be slipping into the eternal genjutsu. Yet Naruto's belief in his own ideals, in the possibility of a better future, never wavered. With the help of his friends, Sasuke, Sakura, Kakashi, and the rest of the Shinobi Alliance, Naruto found the strength to defy Obito's plan and stop the world from descending into an eternal dream. But the victory came at a price. As Naruto and his friends fought to destroy the genjutsu and stop Obito's plan, they faced the immense power of the tailed beasts, who were being used as vessels to fuel the Moon's Eye plan. Naruto, with the help of the other Jinchuriki, struggled to maintain control over the beasts, preventing them from wreaking havoc on the world. The final moments of the battle saw Naruto face the truth about his own power. He had always believed that his strength came from his ability to never give up, to always push forward despite the odds. But in those final moments, he realized that true strength did not come from his own will alone. It came from the bonds he had formed with those around him, from the love and support of his friends and comrades, from the hope that they had all shared for a better world. With this newfound understanding, Naruto was able to defeat Obito, stop the Moon's-Eye plan, and save the world from destruction. But even as they celebrated their victory, the war was far from over. The battle against the forces of darkness had just begun, and the true test of Naruto's beliefs was still ahead. He had learned, however, that no matter how dark the world became, there was always hope, always a chance to change, to grow, and to find peace. The fourth great ninja war had drawn to a close, and the world of shinobi was forever changed. The victory over Obito and the defeat of the Akatsuki had marked the beginning of a new era, one where the ideals of peace, unity, and connection could finally take root. Yet despite the hard-won peace, the journey for Naruto Uzumaki and the world he fought for was far from over. The trials they had faced had been monumental, but they had also brought forth a deeper understanding of what it meant to truly create peace. Naruto, who had once been an outcast, rejected by his own village and burdened with the nine tails within him, had become the very symbol of the hope that Konoha and the entire shinobi world needed. He had fought not only against powerful enemies, but against the darkness within himself, the doubts that had once held him back. He had come to understand that the true power of a shinobi was not in their strength or in their ability to fight, but in their capacity to form bonds, to connect with others, to protect them, and to never give up on them, no matter the odds. But even as the world began to heal, new challenges loomed on the horizon. The aftermath of the war had left the shinobi world in a fragile state. Though the villages had been united in their fight against the Akatsuki, old wounds still ran deep. The scars of past conflicts, of betrayals, and mistrust would not be easily healed. The path to true peace would be a long and difficult one, and it would require the efforts of all those who had fought for that dream. Sasuke Uchiha, the last surviving member of the once proud Uchiha clan, found himself at a crossroads. His journey had been one of both destruction and redemption, a path that had taken him far from the bonds of his friends and his village. The choices he had made, the decisions that had led him to leave Konoha and seek power through the dark paths of Orochimaru, had cost him dearly. But through the guidance of Naruto, and through the realization that revenge alone could never fill the emptiness in his heart, Sasuke had begun to see a new path forward. The path that Sasuke would walk after the war was not an easy one. He had to come to terms with the legacy of his clan, with the actions of his brother, Itachi, and with the choices he had made along the way. But in the aftermath of the war, Sasuke began to understand that true strength did not lie in seeking power for the sake of revenge, but in using one's strength to protect others and to rebuild the world that had been broken. His return to Konoha, though not without its challenges, was a pivotal moment for both him and the village. It was a return not just of a shinobi, but of a person who had learned the value of connection, of trust, and of redemption. For Sakura Haruno, the war had been a time of growth and self-discovery. Though she had always been driven by a desire to prove herself, to be more than just a medical ninja or a teammate, the war had shown her the true depths of her strength. Her bond with Naruto and Sasuke had grown stronger than ever, and through the trials of the war, Sakura had come to understand that her true strength lay not in her ability to fight alone, but in her capacity to support and protect those she cared about. She had fought alongside Naruto and Sasuke, had faced the darkness with them, and in doing so, had discovered her own purpose as a shinobi. The rebuilding of Konoha and of the shinobi world as a whole was not without its difficulties. The villages, though united against a common enemy, now had to face the task of healing the rifts that had divided them for so long. The legacy of past conflicts, of power struggles and distrust, lingered in the hearts of many. But with the leadership of Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura, the villages began to see the potential for a new world, one where peace was not an impossible dream, but a living reality that could be achieved through cooperation, understanding, and the willingness to forgive. The process of healing was slow. The world of shinobi was one built on the foundation of strength and survival, and it would take time for the ideals of peace and unity to take root in such a world. But Naruto's unwavering belief in the goodness of others, in the possibility of a better future, became the guiding light for those who had lost hope. His journey had shown them that, even in the darkest of times, there was always a way forward, always a chance for redemption and growth. As the world began to rebuild, Naruto found himself faced with new responsibilities. The war had taught him the true meaning of leadership, that being a leader was not just about strength, but about guiding others, about showing them the way even when the path seemed unclear. Naruto's dream of becoming Hokage, of being the protector of Konoha, was no longer just a personal ambition, but a responsibility that he would carry with the weight of the world on his shoulders. But Naruto, now more than ever, understood that he would not be alone in this journey. He had his friends, his comrades, and his village to support him. Together, they would face the challenges of the future and continue to build a world where peace could truly flourish. As time passed, the legacy of the Fourth Great Ninja War became a reminder of the sacrifices that had been made, the lives that had been lost, and the lessons that had been learned. The world of shinobi, though forever scarred by the conflicts of the past, began to see the possibility of a new era, an era where the bonds between people were the foundation of peace, where understanding and cooperation were the true strength of the world. Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura, the trio who had once been so different, so divided, now stood together as symbols of the future, a future where the mistakes of the past would not define them, but where the lessons of the past would guide them toward a better world. The journey of the three, though filled with loss and hardship, had shown them the true power of friendship, of redemption, and of the possibility of a world where peace was not just a dream, but a reality. The world of shinobi had been reshaped, the scars of the Fourth Great Ninja War slowly beginning to fade. Konoha, like the other villages, was healing, the memories of war still fresh, but no longer defining the path forward. In this new world, the future seemed both fragile and full of potential, and at the heart of it all, standing tall as a symbol of hope, stood Naruto Uzumaki, the boy who had once been an outcast, rejected by his village, but who had grown into the very symbol of strength, unity, and peace that the shinobi world needed. Naruto's journey had been long, filled with struggles, sacrifices, and painful moments. He had fought not just against external enemies, but against the darkness within himself, the feelings of loneliness and rejection that had threatened to define him. But through every challenge, he had risen stronger, not because of his strength as a shinobi, but because of the unwavering belief he held in the power of bonds, the connections between people that transcended bloodlines, villages, and past mistakes. As Naruto stood at the pinnacle of his journey, the dream he had cherished since childhood to become Hokage was within reach. But what it meant to be Hokage had changed for him. It was no longer about recognition or proving that he was worthy. He had already proven that in the hearts of his people. Now, to be Hokage meant protecting the peace, guiding the village, and ensuring that the lessons of the past were not forgotten. The story of Naruto Uzumaki was a story of transformation. He had started out as a child filled with anger and hurt, driven by the need for recognition. But as he grew, he came to realize that true strength was not about being seen or admired. True strength was about the courage to keep moving forward, to protect others even when it seemed impossible, and to never give up on those you loved, no matter how dark the road became. His dream of becoming Hokage was no longer just his own. It had become the dream of a village, a symbol of the hope that they could overcome the shadows of the past and build a future where peace was possible. Naruto's bond with his friends, his comrades, and his village had defined him. The bond he had shared with Sasuke, once filled with rivalry and pain, had blossomed into a deep understanding, one that transcended words and actions. Sasuke, who had once sought power in isolation, had come to realize that the path of revenge and hatred could never bring peace. Through Naruto's unwavering belief in him, Sasuke had come to understand that the true strength of a shinobi came from the bonds they formed with others. Their bond was one of healing, of redemption, and of understanding that no matter how far they had fallen, there was always a way back. For Sakura, Naruto had been a constant source of inspiration. Her own growth mirrored his, though her path had been different. She had once been someone who doubted her own strength, unsure of her place in the world. But through the trials of the war, through the battles they had fought together, Sakura had come to realize that her strength was not just in her skills as a medical ninja or a fighter. It was in her ability to protect those she loved, to fight for them, and to stand by them, no matter what. The relationship between Naruto and his sensei, Kakashi Hatake, had been one of mutual respect and understanding. Kakashi, though always the more reserved and mysterious figure, had seen in Naruto the same potential that he had seen in his own former student, Minato Namikaze, the fourth Hokage. Kakashi had always been a guide for Naruto, not just in battle, but in life. And in the final stages of the war, it was Kakashi who passed on the mantle of leadership to Naruto, acknowledging that he was ready to become the next Hokage, the leader who would carry the village into the future. As the dust settled after the war, Naruto found himself faced with a world that was in many ways unrecognizable. The ideals of peace, once so distant, now seemed achievable. The villages, once divided by years of mistrust and rivalry, now stood united in their efforts to rebuild and protect the world they had fought to save. But this peace would not come easily. There were still challenges to face, still wounds to heal, and still divisions to mend. Naruto's journey toward becoming Hokage was not the end of his story. It was only the beginning. His leadership would be tested, not just in times of war, but in times of peace. To lead was not just about giving orders or wielding power. It was about understanding the needs of the people, about listening to their concerns, and about guiding them toward a future where everyone, regardless of their past, could live without fear. Naruto understood that peace was not a destination, but a journey, one that would require the collective effort of everyone in the village, not just the Hokage. It was a journey that would require constant vigilance, compassion, and the willingness to make sacrifices for the greater good. He knew that the future would not be free of hardship, but he also knew that the bonds of friendship, love, and trust were stronger than any obstacle they might face. The Hokage's role, once something that seemed distant and unattainable to Naruto, was now within his reach. But the responsibility that came with it was something he took seriously. The legacy of the previous Hokages, Hashirama, Tobirama, Hiruzen, Minato, weighed heavily on his heart. They had all sacrificed so much for the village, and Naruto knew that his path would not be one of easy victories or comfort. He would have to carry the weight of their dreams and their hopes, and he would have to forge his own path forward, one step at a time. Through it all, Naruto's greatest strength remained his belief in others, his faith in people, in their ability to change, to grow, and to come together was what set him apart. He had spent his life fighting not just for himself, but for others, for the village, for his friends, and for the hope of a better world. And as he stood at the threshold of his future, Naruto knew that his journey was far from over. There would always be new challenges to face, new people to meet, and new bonds to form. But in the end, Naruto's legacy was clear. He was not just the Hokage. He was the embodiment of the dream that had once seemed impossible, a dream of peace, of understanding, and of a world where the shinobi could live together, not as enemies, but as allies, bound by the bonds they had formed in the fires of conflict. The world he had fought for, the world he had built, was one where the scars of the past could heal, where the future could be shaped by those who had the courage to dream. Thank you for joining me on this gentle journey through the world of Naruto, where hope, strength, and the bonds of friendship have shaped the destinies of so many. As we reach the end of this tale, may the lessons learned that even in the darkest moments there is always light, that peace can be forged through understanding and connection, stay with you as they have stayed with Naruto and all those who walked beside him. The world may always have its trials, but just as Naruto believed, so too can we find strength in the people around us, in the bonds we create, and in the dreams that carry us forward. May your heart find rest tonight, just as Konoha finds its peace, and may you continue to walk forward with hope, no matter what challenges come your way. Good night, and may your dreams be as peaceful and fulfilling as the journey we've just shared.